Alrighty. Hey everybody. Just waiting for the other host to join here, and we've got a few minutes before we start anyway. So the good news is that this is also being recorded. It's also being streamed onto YouTube as well, and we'll be splitting up the guests, and you'll be able to re-listen to them again in the future as well. So that's going to be very nice. Uh-oh, Jesse's here. So send co-host. All right, Jesse, I've invited you to be the co-host, sadly. So it should work now.
Greetings.
Oh, greetings indeed. I found out this morning that because you are the co-host, if for some reason I leave the space, it won't end.
Oh, good. That makes sense.
It will be transferred. It makes sense, but it wasn't like that before. So it's been improved quite a lot, actually. So I'm really happy about that. For the record, we have a whole bunch more people listening from YouTube, actually, which is really cool. So I think that'll probably be where the majority of people listen to the stream, which is kind of cool, actually. And then I'm guessing it's being recorded as well.
And those over in the YouTube chat, I see a hi from Vienna, Austria. So hello, everyone. Feel free to tell us where you're coming from. I see greetings from Mexico. Let us know. Hello from Belgium. Let us know where you're listening from if you're in the YouTube chat. That would be cool. I love seeing it.
Yeah, this is cool. We've got lots of Europeans and a couple of people from the US.
Yep, and the Europeans will have, incrementally more beer in hand by the time we get to the end of the event, so that's fine too.
Yep. How exciting. And it's being recorded. I have the recording set up for everything. And I think what I'm going to do is towards the end, well, when this is done over the weekend, I'm going to split each guest up into their own sort of video, basically, and then it can be linked straight to where the speaker is, like basically their own video, which is kind of cool. That would be nice.
All right, fantastic. And we're approaching it. We're at the top of the hour, I guess. So we're about to kick things off. But I see some more cool hellos in the YouTube chat. I see Canada. I see Raleigh, North Carolina. I see Honduras. I see United Kingdom, Israel. Keep it coming, guys. Idaho. Thank you much.
Wow.
So that being said, we have a bunch of people joining the live both on YouTube and here on Twitter. I'll kick things off, I guess, by saying thanks everybody for coming. For those who are tuned in already, of course, common sense things. Feel free to join or drop off and rejoin if you need to, but we'll be here for the next several hours according to schedule. A lot of you already know the hosts. I'm Jesse Grzinski from IBM. I'm the business architect of all things open source, and I'm joined today as, my co-host today is the one and only Liam Allen. So Liam, feel free to introduce yourself.
Wow, you're really sweet. Well, yeah, my name is Liam. Also go by Barry to some. Apparently, I also work for IBM now. That is a thing.
That is a thing.
Yeah, that is a thing. I know.
I mean, we were trying to figure out,
like that.
Yeah, how could I be more of a pain in your neck? So we figured it out.
You really did a great job figuring it out too. So yeah, now at IBM, and my current role is not quite as vague as Jesse's. I have a specific niche that I'm working on, which obviously is Merlin right now. And I'm still dabbling in the open source stuff as well, which is always a treat. I am really glad to see that this is actually turning out quite well, and so now I can officially confirm it's being recorded. I would like to say two things. First off, if you miss something today, it will be available again, unlike last year, when, even though it recorded, Twitter didn't let you download the audio, so I couldn't reshare it with everybody, which is cool. So everything will be recorded today, which is awesome. Number two,
Fantastic.
we have a schedule. I imagine the majority of people who are listening know that we have a schedule. It's on the website, iDeveloperDay.com. We are fortunate enough to have set up such a wide topic of speakers, which is mostly down to Jesse's great doing. I have never had the chance to speak to anybody who works on quantum before, so even for me, this is definitely going to be that's probably something I'm really looking forward to. So I can't wait for that.
And in all, I mean, the speaker lineup today for the speakers who are already tuned in, a huge thank you as well. And I'll be thanking again at the end of the day. But we have such a cool speaker lineup today. I apologize in advance. I'll probably be fanboying much of the day because we really are honored to have true experts in their fields for all of the cool topics today. I mean, we have people talking Kubernetes. We have people talking Apache Camel, which we all know that I love. We have Liam mentioned quantum computing. We have a lot of the modern development stuff, the new stuff happening with IBM, and we have all these real true experts of field today. And just for what it's worth, really great people joining the stream and being co-hosts or guests with us today. So excited to have all these people on board.
Yep. And it's quite funny that we talk about having these great guests. A month or two ago when we were kind of deciding how the schedule was going to be lined up, originally it was supposed to start later than this, but then we had a great idea to get someone from England in, Andy Ewens and Nick Ewens, and so the schedule
legends.
Legends. Yeah, the schedule was never one piece until about a week ago when we finally filled our last spot, because you wouldn't believe how many people take vacations this time of year. First off, trying to get people to speak on a Friday afternoon apparently is very difficult, even from home. And it's actually shorter than what it was last year. So this year it's about 3 hours, which is nice actually. So we've got 10 or so guests at like 20 minutes each, which is really great. I mean, that's a lot of people for 3 hours to fit in such a short amount of time. So I may actually have to get a notebook out. And what's really nice is that this year, it's not just me. I mean, the good news is now I can give it to Jesse when I need a break or when he needs a break, and we can step apart, which is really cool. I really like that about Twitter Spaces a lot.
Yeah, it's good stuff, and more people joining us from both YouTube and Twitter. I see this is fantastic. Other things, if anybody is in their first Twitter space, of course, you may already know this, you may not. Today's presentation is really just conversation format. It's relatively informal. We don't have display. I mean, we're not sharing screens. We're not running through PowerPoints or anything like that. We just have the industry thought leaders in talking about what they're doing, who they are, and talking about some really great technologies that might spur some great ideas in IBMI or other shops around the world for anybody who's listening in. So just a heads up there, if you're on Twitter or YouTube or something and you're expecting to see PowerPoint slides, this is not the place to be. We are really just having some really good conversations with some brilliant minds today.
Yep, and I'll give a shout out to using the Twitter Space. What I really like about Twitter Spaces is how accessible it is. So one of the things I really like is that it has closed captions in real time, and I didn't have to enable that. It just happens, which is really good for after the stream as well, because it will let me download the closed captions, and when I create the videos, I can have subtitles right there and then ready to go, which is really cool. Twitter's done a great job with that. And also it translates in real time. So if you are not a native speaker, you can actually have the closed captions translate to your language in real time, which I think that's pretty cool. I think that's really respectable. A really cool piece of technology, I think. So maybe, Jesse, we should just get started.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Let's our first guest is waiting as a listener. We'll get him promoted to a speaker in just a few moments. Kick off the day. I'm guessing he doesn't need an introduction. Steve Will, one of the most prominent members of the IBMI development team. He's, of course, the IBMI CTO, and he's here today to talk to us about some really cool stuff happening with the platform. And I see we got him in now as speaker. So, Steve, welcome aboard. And just in case people don't know you, give us a brief introduction of who you are, what you do, and any cool things you've been working on.
Okay, cool. And you can hear me fine since this is my first attempt at this? Yeah?
We
sound
gotcha.
excellent.
Well, first of all, super excited to be able to join you guys for the Developer Day. You know, the point of our platform, IBMI, is to be a platform where anybody would want to run their business solutions, right? And so it's the developers who are behind those solutions that drive the successful adoption of our platform. So glad to be part of this. As Jesse said, I'm the CTO, the Chief Technology Officer for the IBMI business. I've been the chief architect now, turns out, for almost exactly 15 years. It was in August 15 years ago that I took over this role. At the time, I was called the System Chief Engineering Manager, and shortly thereafter, we created the title of Chief Architect. And so for a long time, it's been my responsibility to look out into the future of what our customers are going to need and what our platform can deliver to our customers, and then help lead the team towards fulfilling the needs of those clients. I get to work with a whole lot of customers and ISVs, developers who meet with me, and business leaders who meet with me on a regular basis to be able to give me the insight that I need to be able to help lead the team. And of course, folks on my team, like Jesse and now Liam, welcome to the team, Liam. Right, that is one of the hallmarks of being part of the IBMI development team, is that we work so directly with the folks who use our platform. So, Jesse, Liam, you had me on this with a title of IBMI in 7.5. I did want to mention, before we get into any like Q&A back and forth or whatever, number one thing is that so much of what we do is actually delivered because of requests that we get from our customer base. In this last year, we've transitioned from the old way of asking us for things, which was requests for enhancements, into this new way, which is ideas. But it's all about you folks out there in the world who have to develop on the platform or run the platform, giving us suggestions on things that will make your life better on IBMI. And so in between the 7.4 release 3 years ago and the 7.5 release, which became available here in the spring of this year, we delivered 499 things that came from the community, requests that came from the community in those 3 years. And then when we delivered 7.5 and the associated products, including Merlin, which I certainly want to talk about, it was another 128, right? So we're talking over 600 ideas delivered in the last 3 years that came from our community. Now, some of those things we had thought of. I mean, we're not dumb, right? Some of those things we had thought of, but it's so important to get those requests from our community, to know that the things that we may have thought of and the things that we haven't are things that are needed. So that is one of the highlights for me of this job, is knowing that we are delivering things that people asked for. Now, we don't deliver everything you ask for. We still only deliver about 30 to 40% of the things that people ask for. But there's a huge number of things people ask for that we can prove, because we've got support from the community, that those are things that help customers. And it isn't only about helping customers. It is certainly about driving business. But it turns out the best way to drive business is to help customers. So anyway.
Yeah, and on that, I mean, I love the new ideas portal. You know, the web page is great. It actually works a lot better than some of the iterations we've had in the past. But I mean, just this idea, Steve, I'm glad you touched on it, that, you know, a member of the community can submit a suggestion, and that suggestion will be looked at by some kind of thought leader or decision maker on the IBM side, right? And that's something that's not common in the industry, especially if you're thinking about like other operating system platforms, right? There's nowhere that I can submit a a request for an enhancement of Windows Server and be sure that some Microsoft person is is actually going to be looking and thinking about this, right? So I love that as a differentiation for the platform. I'm glad you brought that up.
That's cool.
I do think it goes even further than just the operating system level stuff, though. I mean, it even goes as far as products. I mean, what I can appreciate is that those that work on technology on the platform, so I'll just use ODBC as a prime example. You know, it's mostly grown because of the community interaction around it, and also I completely agree. The new Ideas portal is a significant upgrade over RFEs. RFEs were really very good at the start because it really just gave a central way for people to make suggestions, and it was good at the time. But having used and seen Ideas Portal now, it is much nicer and it's much easier to communicate. And also, you don't have to sign in to view ideas, which is kind of nice. It's a nice big change. That's a good change that they got in there.
Right. Hopefully, it means that
Anyway.
even more people are going to look at those things and lend their support to those ideas. You know, there's a whole value that we get from knowing that 20 people will improve their businesses or improve their daily operations or whatever, as opposed to just one person putting it out there and then we have to evaluate it. So that's helpful. Yep.
Right. Yeah, I agree completely. So Steve, I know that you were excited for a lot of things in 7.5. One of them obviously was Merlin. I mean, there are plenty of blog posts specifically about Merlin, but you know, what is it about Merlin that kind of gets you excited about where the platform is going? You know, where does it take IBMI?
Well, yeah, that's a great way to ask the question. In our marketplace, and everybody who's listening to this knows, in our marketplace, there are so many customers who feel stuck with the software that has been developed for them 20 or 30 years ago. And they want a path to move forward to get to what we've been calling next generation of their product. Okay. But they haven't really understood how they want to get there. And there are a lot of folks out in the community who help people get there, and you can listen to them. But we thought it was time, after hearing so many of our community say, just, you know, what should I do next? We thought it was important to create a product that would guide them on the steps that they might want to take. And so what's exciting to me about Merlin, number one, is that it's getting people to examine how they should move forward. What aspect of their application or their data usage or how they use IBMI in their business, what should they do first, and then where will they go next? Just doing that analysis is making a difference in our customer base and in our success as a platform. Because when a client says, I'm going to take the next step towards making my solution modern, they're reinvesting in IBMI and they're gaining value for their business. It's a win-win for us all. So just by having the product, it makes people do that analysis and makes that recommitment happen. But then the product itself makes things easier. It pulls together a bunch of technologies that, I mean, sadly, it's been too complicated to pull together outside of that product. Now, many people have done it, but there's a vast majority of our IBMI clientele who wants things to be integrated, simple, lead them by the hand. And we understand that because their primary job, many of them, is not just to do this modernization. They also have to run their business, et cetera, right? So as much help as we can give them, we're going back to kind of the value proposition of this platform from the beginning. Let us take care of the complexity, and then you learn what you need to learn to move forward one more step in your business evolution. And that's, like I said, that's been exciting.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, having actually been in depth now, I can definitely see how the product is an all-inclusive piece, right? I mean, the idea is that it continues with the integration side of IBMI. You know, you get the operating system and you get everything that you need to run your business, including now a fully fledged development environment, which is kind of nice because, you know, I can speak on it.
Yeah.
You know, the idea is that, you know, with running a business, you shouldn't have to worry about actually having to set up and get everybody's different environments configured. And the idea is that you have Merlin, and it has your continuous integration there. It has your development environment there, and there's much more to come, I'm sure of that. So for sure. And one other thing I would like to ask is about 7.5. I mean, you said 7.4 was 3 years ago.
That's right. Yep.
Wow, 3 years ago. So, and you said around 600 community-based enhancements were added.
Yep.
Of the 600, is there one of those that stands out to you? At least one of those that stands out to you? You've kind of piqued my interest at such a high number.
Okay, so there's a key set of enhancements around security for the DB2, or for DB2 and for the rest of the system as part of 7.5 that have come in specifically as requests. So the stuff that we had added, for example, around making things secure by default, changing star public to star use. That was one of those things that, yeah, we had thought of in the past, but it came in as a request that had tremendous numbers of people. Now, let me explain why that is so important to me. Our history, our 30+ year history on this platform has almost always tended to say we won't change defaults, because so frequently when you change a default, you mess up the operations of the 80% of the customers who aren't even going to pay attention to the fact that you had this announcement, right? 3 years later, they'll put on the release, they didn't pay attention, and you changed the default on them. So we had this idea to change the default star public authority to star use a long time ago. Well, the RFE, because it was initially an RFE, came in and got so much support. And so we were able to converse with the people who were supporting that and say, you realize that, technically this could cause an operational difficulty for you if you have copied one of our commands or made changes to our commands. And they said, that's okay. It's such an issue with us to have to prove to auditors that people can't do things that are bad for the system. If you change star public to star use for all the stuff you ship with the operating system, it'll be so much easier. And that is one of our big pain points. Our big pain points right now are related to the fact that we have to prove to our business and to auditors that our system is secure. And we know it is, but it looks so bad. It looks like anybody can change anything. And so we said, well, of course, that's why we'd want to do it. We'd want to do it so that so anyway, it was one of those things where they convinced us that it was far better for them if we changed this default. And so far, with the people who have rolled out 7.5, there have been no issues with that. So it was good to get that kind of feedback. And it all came from the fact that there was an RFE with so many supporters, and we could talk to them and get that value.
Right. Wow. That actually came out with 7.5 as well. Yeah, one of my favorite things that came out more recently is also part of the database. Of course, I find that in terms of the operating system enhancements to the database, it tends to get me most excited, if you like. So I know that the DB2 team, at least the DB2 for I team, are constantly staying up to date with the SQL standard, and so the enhancement of adding the Boolean values, the true and false, actually as part of the database is definitely one of my more technical excitements, which is really good because this actually opens the database up to running many, many more applications that previously didn't run on the platform. So, there are lots of user installable apps that, want to use DB2 but haven't been able to previously due to the lack of Boolean support. And I think that this one definitely opens up.
Oh, yeah.
Actually opens up a whole tin of worms that I really am excited about.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear you say that. I mean, it is one of the biggest things that we added to the release, and we have been looking forward to doing that. So it's going to be great that it helps so many apps.
Yeah, it mostly helps apps come onto the platform. That's really what gets me excited. I mean, it will be exciting when I'll see clients actually make use of it, which I think will be slow turnaround. But when they do, I think it'll be good for everybody, which is really nice. So, okay, thank you for sharing that about the star use. It's a piece of knowledge that I've just learned about right there. My next question to you is how do I word this where it doesn't put you in a strange position? What is something that we can look forward to now? You know, we have the start of Merlin, and we have some major database enhancements, which is really nice. But what is something that, you know, we can say to users, to developers, you know, that will keep them excited for until the next release, which, you know, there won't be another major release like 7.5 for probably another few years.
Yeah.
But of course, there'll be a TR
Right.
in the meantime.
Yep. Okay. Yeah. So the first thing to recognize is that even as we put out Merlin, we knew that we wanted to make sure Merlin's IDE had a debugger connected to it. And so if you started looking at Merlin and you notice that we don't have a debugger, it's coming, and that's going to be a game changer for folks who want to be able to truly use it as a full function IDE. So that's one thing. The other thing, though, is actually related back to the whole ideas thing. No matter what language or environment you're using on the platform, we have requests from customers for new enhancements to RPG to make it either more powerful in how it uses the database, or more likely to make it more like other modern languages in the things that it can do. You know, the stuff that we announced related to RPG enhancements were actually made available not just on 7.5, but also with TRs, essentially, you know, functional updates on 7.4's version of RPG as well, because we don't want people to have to wait until they have the most recent release to be able to do something new in RPG. Right. And Jesse's team is constantly getting requests for, can you make the most recent version of this open source tool? Can you help make sure that that's out there? And so that's another piece of this. So I guess one of the things that I will just keep harping on with people is, when we make a big announcement like this, we don't stop, right? We continue answering those ideas. And so you could ask Jesse, what's the next cool thing that's going to happen in open source? And you could ask, well, Jesse again, or Tim, when's the next version of Java going to be available? All those things will happen in an ongoing basis as they're available for clients, long before we ever get to that next major release, because we develop things in a just-in-time kind of way these days, a very agile approach.
Yeah, that is very nice.
Yep. So Steve, you have about 4 or 5 minutes left. We have a few hundred people actually tuning in on Twitter, on YouTube right now. For the folks who haven't heard it in the last few minutes, can you just summarize the IBMI strategy? I know we have, usually what's described as this 3-prong overall strategy. Could you just provide a quick overview of that while you wrap up your time today?
Absolutely, sure. And it's a great thing to do with this group, because the first element of our strategy is do what our solution providers need us to do so that their solutions can be ready for tomorrow, right? So that's number one thing. What does our database need to do? What do our current languages need to do? What are the tools that are coming into their own in the marketplace? How do we make sure that we can either have them running on the platform or we can integrate with them? So first and foremost, what do our solution providers need? Then there is no one path to moving forward. There have to be options. So we give you options on how you move forward. Now that's options in terms of how you code things, what sorts of languages you want to use, what sorts of tools you want to use for those languages. We give you options, but we also give you options on where you run things. I imagine that there are some of you out there right now who are considering, should I run IBMI in a hosted or cloud environment? Perfectly valid option. It's not for everybody, but it's for some people, and there's no reason that you can't do what makes sense for your business, because we give you those options and you have the same IBMI no matter what we do. And then the third aspect is why we're called I in the first place. As much as we can, we integrate that technology so that you don't have to get a PhD in a new technology to use it. We try to make it simple and then integrate it into our security model, the architecture of our database, so that you gain the full value of the platform with any of that new stuff without having to become an expert. Those are the key things that are part of our strategy and will be part of our strategy as we move forward.
Wow.
All right. Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you
Bet.
for sharing all that. That's great. And any other closing thoughts you have for this audience, Steve?
Just if you're out there in the developer community, thank you so much, and thank you for continuing to learn, because you're helping all of us drive this platform into the future. Without developers doing things the new, modern, right way, this platform would stagnate. So keep learning and keep doing.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, Steve.
No, Jesse,
all right,
go ahead.
Nope. So I was just going to say we have Robert Laredo back on queue to be the next on deck. He's having a little bit of issue getting signed in, so while we're trying to get that straightened out, get him in here to speak.
We have pretty much almost every continent covered at the moment.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
This is kind of ridiculous. I didn't expect that.
That's awesome. And when Robert gets in, we'll let him do an introduction of himself and what he does and all the cool stuff he works on with IBM quantum computing. But I do want to share a quick story about Robert, which is a bit of a frustrating story, and I don't mean that in any way bad about Robert, but we were doing a lot of IBMI and quantum stuff for Power Up 2020, which you can imagine in the end that didn't quite work out well. But it's still to this day is one of my biggest disappointments that never was able to materialize just due to the big chain of events in the world at the time. But Robert, even since then, has been a great ally to the platform and has worked with us on a lot of stuff. We were putting together a quantum workshop, so you could have gotten hands-on doing some quantum stuff with IBMI. We had Robert actually helping, I think, with the keynotes that year and doing some kind of overview and technical sessions as well. So, definitely hope to get that together again or something like it in the future. I see Robert is in the space now, so he'll be joining us shortly. But again, that really for me was one of the biggest disappointments, especially around that era from a professional perspective, because I was so looking forward to this conference because we had it loaded up between Robert Laredo, myself, Jack War, doing all kinds of quantum stuff, including some really fun hands-on stuff. And unfortunately that never panned out, but they have been doing some fantastic things ever since, which we're going to hear Robert give us an overview of.
I take it you have invited him, Jesse?
Yep. He popped in the chat. I did invite him as a speaker, but I'm not seeing him. Where is he at?
I see him. He's 5 lines down on my screen.
There he is, Robert. Invite to speak.
I am pretty excited about this one. I haven't had the chance to do much with quantum yet. I know that it's kind of funny because I'm in a few quantum Slack channels now, and they're pretty buzzing. And so I'm still kind of lost on what the use case is for me, at least. That's kind of
right.
what I'm hoping to figure out, at least on my side, as a plain old boring developer that I am.
Right. So are you in the Qiskit Slack, Liam?
I am. Yeah, I am. It's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
And there's, for those not familiar with the term, I mentioned the term Qiskit, which is Qiskit, and Robert and I will speak about this a little bit more in a few minutes. But Qiskit is an open source framework for doing quantum computing stuff, right? So you can use this Qiskit library to either fire up a quantum computing emulator, start throwing computations at it, build what we call quantum circuits, or you can even sign up for an IBM Q cloud account and you can start sending your quantum experiments, as they call them, to real life quantum hardware. All really, really amazing, exciting stuff.
Yeah. Now, pre Qiskit, you know, this was probably 5+ years ago. Microsoft have had an equivalent called Q Sharp.
Yeah, yeah.
But I know that Qiskit is actually more popular than Q Sharp. It seems. I think that more development time is being spent on that SDK rather than the Microsoft one. But I don't know how they compare. But I'm definitely curious. That's for sure. I used to be
Right.
really into quantum when it was sort of first coming around, like 2013 onwards, 2013, 2015, and just haven't lately. Okay, so I asked Robert to restart his app. So I think that there is a bug in Spaces where, like I noticed this was happening when we did the test, where it doesn't show you when you're invited to speak or co-host. So fingers crossed,
Right.
we can get him in it.
Fingers crossed we can get him in. So in the meantime, I will do a little bit more advertising for this Qiskit library, right? Again,
Yes.
it's Qiskit. I'll put a link shortly in the YouTube channel as well. I'm not here to compare it against anything else, but Qiskit is not specific to IBM quantum technologies. It's designed to be an industry-wide effort to be able to define quantum instructions in this thing called Quasm, QASM, and all this fun stuff. But the thing that I want to boast about the most now is if you go out to qiskit.org, which is KIT.org, there is getting started out there, and then there's also tutorials out there that are really amazing. If you've never touched quantum computing before, the idea is that you'll be able to go out to these tutorials, and it actually has in your web browser, it has these interactive fields. It's essentially a Jupyter notebook for those familiar, where you can go out and learn about, here's what a quantum circuit is, and here's a couple snippets of Python code. Qiskit, by the way, is a Python-based technology. But you can go out and say, okay, here's a couple lines of Python code, and you can actually click through, run those couple lines, see what would happen with those couple lines of Python code, learn about the next thing, right? And eventually you get into, learning more about the Qiskit libraries. You get to learn more about like the visualization techniques. Get to dive a lot deeper into what we call quantum circuits as well. And so I see Robert is now in as a speaker. So Robert, welcome in. I was just boasting about the awesome tutorials over at qiskit.org, which again have been really greatly improved over time.
Yeah, that's great. Thank
anybody,
you.
yeah. So everybody on the stream, welcome into Robert Laredo. I was telling the folks as well about Power Up 2020 and all the great stuff we had planned for that didn't quite work out. Want to get that together someday as well. But Robert, to start off for your time slot, I'll hand things over to you. I'll let you tell everybody what it is you do here at IBM. Even tell them you literally wrote the book on some of this quantum stuff, and just anything you'd like to lead with quantum computing technology.
Well, definitely when I say I wrote the book on a lot of this stuff, there were a lot more before me. But if anything, I probably dissected out some pieces to make it easier for a developer maybe to get on board. So everybody, my name is Robert Laredo. I am the IBM Quantum Ambassador Worldwide Lead. What that basically means is I have a group of members, IBMers all around the world that are trained basically in quantum and of course on Qiskit and developing, and they're all from, of course, range from different industries, and they basically go around and just do things like this, educate, enable, talk to different folks that are interested in learning about quantum, as well as what they can do to get started. So that's part of the reason why I'm here today with you all, is to kind of give you guys some insights on what there is that's out there. And I can definitely guarantee that there's a lot of stuff out there now that helps somebody get on board than there was just a few years ago when these things started coming up and getting a bit more popular. With regards to the book that Jesse mentioned, yeah, I did write a book about a little over a year ago. It's basically on how to program, learning how to program on IBM Quantum using Python and the IBM Quantum platform. So you could look for those on Amazon if you like. A cheap plug there, I guess. But yes, I'm open for whatever you guys want to cover today.
So Robert, could you give our guests a little bit more of a summary of this thing that used to be called the IBM Quantum Experience? I think now it's just rebranded to IBM Quantum, this whole cloud-based thing. What can you do just through this cloud interface, and how much does it cost somebody who wants to just learn about this stuff?
Right. So yes. So we have it. So when we first put our quantum computers out in the cloud, the idea was to make it available for free, just because we figured that's the best way to really evolve the technology really quickly, as opposed to be keeping it behind closed doors and limiting it to just whoever those people are inside to work on things. So we opened it up, made it available for everybody, and of course it wasn't easy because putting a quantum computer on the cloud, putting any computer on the cloud isn't an easy task, let alone a quantum computer. So did a lot of work around that, built the infrastructure to be able to not only load it, but ensure that it's available, so it's always running 24/7. And of course, when you make something open source, as most people here knows, that's a lot of people that's going to be accessing it. So having the reliability up there and running it on the cloud was very important. Along with that, of course, we wanted to make sure that we folks actually had a good way to use it. It's one thing to put a system on the cloud. It's different. It's okay, now how do you go about using it? So with that, they also created the Qiskit open source platform. And that one basically is just that. It's a programming kit. It was built onto Python. Early on, they were looking at creating it for different types of programming, and some folks thought about maybe having a programming language, but we kind of figured for something that the regular use case for quantum systems are basically most people that are doing, heavy computation. So most of them are already using Python. So the idea was we wanted to make it as simple as possible. So let's load it onto as a library into Python. So that way you don't have to learn a whole new language, or worse, create it, have another language that's on a different type of platform and put those things together. So most of us who've been programming know that's usually a headache, let alone trying to get everything working together cohesively. So that was where the Qiskit platform came from. And then from there, of course, we want to also make it easier for folks that aren't too familiar with Python or just programming in general. So we created this IBM Quantum. Originally, it was called the IBM Quantum Experience, which basically had everything loaded on there. Not only the hardware, of course, that you had access to, but you also had access to the software. Right? It was already loaded. You opens up a Python script, so you could actually just start typing and running. You didn't have to install anything locally, and there were a lot of tutorials initially that they started. Actually, back then they were called user guides. And then somebody wrote a beginner user guide because the user guide was pretty heavy, really quick, just to sort of get things started and learn the basic principles and kind of build from there. And since then, of course, this open source community that was built along that ecosystem just grew really, really, really large. I mean, we're like now, I think over 400,000 users worldwide. There's over 1 trillion circuits being run. So it's a lot of the things that have grown since then. And of course, the Qiskit community itself was born from that, which most of us, I think, here that I know I see a few names here that are quite familiar, that are part of that. And that's just a really great way to not only have a place to go and learn and use a quantum computer, but also be able to collaborate with other enthusiasts or researchers or folks from academia, and just ask questions, right? And just really get to it. I mean, that's usually where a lot of the collaboration and enablement really happens. And finally, of course, Jesse, you mentioned the cost. The great thing about this is the very beginning was the cost was free, and it still is. Because obviously education is very, very important on these things, and IBM's always been in the forefront in that aspect of open source. If you can think back even the early days of Eclipse and things like this, right? Education is something that we want to make sure that we have. So we do have a textbook and everything, and having access to these systems for free makes it that much easier for folks to get on board and actually not just simulate certain things, but actually try them on actual hardware.
Yeah, and to me, that's so powerful and so exciting that literally anybody listening into the stream today can take this away from the conversation and actually go run things on real quantum hardware for free, right?
Yeah.
Like that's amazing.
What I can really appreciate about the Qiskit website is that there is actually a drop down that says applications, and inside of it you actually have real world, tutorials on how it can be used in finance. Now that's quite impressive. That's really the part that I haven't seen yet. And I can really appreciate that those examples actually exist with a tutorial on how to use it, which is very cool.
Right.
I love education.
And some of those examples as well. I mean, it's very easy to see the applicability of quantum computing to the IBMI crowd, right? Because finance is the perfect example, right? IBMI has a huge footprint in this industry, and that's also an industry where quantum computing has a lot of promise, right? And you start to see those overlaps in a hurry, right? And I love this idea of being able to tie the fantastic enterprise technologies like IBMI with something like Qiskit and IBM quantum computing, right?
So Jesse, I know that I mean, I've known you for years now, and I know that every 6 months you'll say to me, something quantum related. And maybe by now,
Yep.
you actually, maybe you could share something where you've seen where quantum actually has a direct role in an IBMI business. I don't know if you would have that yet.
Yeah. Well, so we don't have everything formulated to talk the details, but if you look at some of the IBM quantum success stories, some of those are IBMI clients, and it's one of those things where it's like, if you know, you'll know who they are, right? But we have had a fair number now of IBMI clients actually using this stuff at minimum from an experimentation perspective, doing investigation, trying to see where it fits into their organization, right?
That's really cool.
And I also love shout out to Robert. I mean, and Jack War, who I think is listening in the chat today as well. We were brainstorming for some event. I think it might have been the Futures Conference last year about, can we get an applied use case of something that an IBMI might provide, that something a quantum computer might be able to do something good at. And one of the things that Robert and his team came up with is this idea of Boolean satisfiability problems as this type of computing problem that quantum computers solve really well. And Robert, I'll let you say a few things on this because you're the expert on this. But so we were able to put together an example where you have a bit of Python code that queries the information and essentially builds the satisfiability matrix out of DB2 based on whatever your core business computes. So it's all stuff that you'd pull out from your core business RPG code through a stored procedure or something, build that satisfiability matrix, and then pass that on to a quantum computer. And in fact, I have a little Docker container sample of a program that does that. But Robert, if you could talk a little bit about like satisfiability issues and why that might matter, that'd be awesome.
Sure, yeah. So I think the example you mentioned was that we used a logical expression, I think was generally what we use as the satisfiability problem, right? And so there's various different algorithms that are within quantum that can solve certain problems, at least that are advantageous comparatively to classical systems. Most of them, of course, are just from a fundamental perspective. This particular one, I think we were looking at is using Grover's algorithm, which is a famous algorithm, almost as, but not as quite as famous as Shor. When you think about quantum, people usually talk Shor first, but Grover's is just as important. It does talk because it highlights a lot of the differentiation between classic and quantum, and because quantum computing in general has three different principles that you need to really know, right? One of them is superposition, the other one is entanglement, and the third one is, of course, interference. And Grover's uses these probabilities and these properties and principles in order to be able to solve a particular problem. In this case, it was a satisfiability problem. And the way it does that is being able to leverage all of those pieces. Now, when you talk about superposition, you usually hear this thing about 1 and 0 at the same time, and that's sort of true. I mean, it's not at the same time. It's a combination of the two is really the more specific type of way to describe that particular phenomena within quantum computing. So there's that, and of course the entanglement is being able to just put a couple of qubits together and entangle them in a way where then there's certain information that can be sort of shared between the two, loosely speaking, of course. And interference, of course, is being able to adjust amplification, right? You think about waves in the water when we take physics in high school or college. Waves, when they come together and they both have amplitude, they go up, or they have a trough and then they come down, or if they cancel each other out. So it's these principles that Grover's uses to be able to solve this problem very, very, very quickly and efficiently. Where normally, if you're doing it classically, you can think about you have to iterate through each particular item if you're searching for something. Whereas in Grover's, it pretty much does it on one call, one query. So that is one of the main differences you can see is there's a speed up of that in that particular pace. And mentioning what Liam mentioned earlier about the applications, so there's two things to think about, right? Well, first thing is understanding quantum computing or the computation of it, and that's the education part, right? So we're learning what is superposition, how does a qubit represent superposition, entanglement, and interference, and then how do we code that? What does that look like? So things like Grover's and Deutsch-Jose algorithms, these things are kind of really good at not only describing but also illustrating how they can be used and where the advantages come from. The second part of that, and going to Liam's point there on the application component, is all right. Now that I understand the computations, how do I actually apply it? Where can we put this, right? And I usually refer to it as sort of an enablement. How do I enable you to not only understand how these things are, but how do you apply it, and then how do you apply it to your real world industry cases? So that was one of the main reasons why the Qiskit community team put together those application modules, because if teaching you and running something like Grover's is interesting, but now how could it be used in other places? And not just with search algorithms, you can also be looking at things like neural networks, machine learning, chemistry, optimization, all of these different things. So it's that integration between the two that is really the interesting component, because it's how do I get that classical application to work with this quantum computation aspect of it, and that's basically how we kind of put everything together there in a sense.
Yeah, and I think you're touching on a great point, right? Like, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the future of quantum technologies, at least the near-term future as we see it, is not to supplant what we call traditional computing, right? It's more of like this augmenting type of technology. Is that a fair statement?
Yes, it's not a replacement. Right? I always say, classic computers, the quantum computers don't replace it. A good analogy is just think of it as you have a CPU for classical systems, you have a GPU, and now you have a QPU. You have a quantum processing unit. So you would use it only for particular things where those things would be advantageous, right, for certain computations. There's other things that work perfectly well on classic. There's no need to do anything on it, but there's some computations which might be intractable for a classical system that you might want to run on a quantum system, and that's where you basically run that calculation there.
Right. And so one of the bigger questions I get a lot when I talk about quantum, and apologies, I don't mean to blindside you with this one, but take me for example. I'm old enough to remember TGIF on ABC, right? And at this point in my career, why should somebody like me or any IT professional at this point, why should I care about quantum computing? Why should I be looking at this stuff?
Yeah, so I guess and that question obviously is usually common across from obviously for different reasons, but more so there's always a question why look at it now? I can actually maybe say a couple of reasons, right? One of them obviously it's definitely it has potential, proven potential in a sense, right? Like I mentioned, these algorithms like Grover's and Deutsch and Shor's can see that describe a way where you can use these quantum systems in a way that can benefit classical systems or existing applications can benefit from having quantum do a lot of this computation. On the other side, of course, is why now? Why not later when they're built? It's like, well, that's the same thing I would said if you're going back in history, you're thinking about when AI, there was a scarcity of talent, right? So if anything, it's this time. This is the most ideal time, probably better than any, I think, to be quantum ready, if anything at all, because you have access. You have access to the devices, you have access to the system, you have access to enablement material, education content. Of course, venues like this where you can actually talk about it, talk with others, to where you can really kind of not only learn about the technology, but also come up with ideas. I mean, this is the early days, right? It's usually, very rarely we go through these sort of pioneering, frontier type of areas in technologies. So, it's a great time to get in it just for that. I mean, if you're interested in discovery and being able to understand things and try to make things a little quicker and better, that's generally what, this is one of the reasons why you want to make sure you get in on now. And of course, not getting behind, because as if you haven't already tried, quantum computing isn't a quick on ramp, right? You can't really just jump, all right, I'm going to take this weekend, read a book and go. It's a lot more than that. It's a little bit more involved, right? And it's not just, like I said, it's not just understanding what the techniques are, what the principles are, but then there's that very, very difficult part of just understanding, right now, how do I apply it? Where is it best applied, right? I could find maybe 10 things to apply it on, but what's the feasibility? How do I understand what type of performance do I need of a quantum computer to be able to know this is something I can work in the next year, because I know in a year I'll be able to do this. And that's the sort of things why you want to kind of think about this now.
Of all the things that you said, then one thing that really stood out to me was that you said it was still early days. So were you referring to the point that it's still early days in quantum? And does that mean, what kind of challenges is quantum facing still take it out of early days,
Good question. So early days, it's definitely not early days of quantum. Quantum's been around since the early 1920s, right? So it's definitely not a new technology. It's new in a sense from an accessibility, accessibility, I should say. So being able to go on and start learning right now without it just being a theoretical book. Like if you go back 10 years, unless you work in a physics lab or in a research laboratory where you're working on maybe some early qubits to be able to represent things, here you actually have ability to be able to use quantum systems that have qubits that are, of course, they're also in their early stages, what they're calling near-term devices, but they're evolving just as fast. A few years ago, less than 5 years ago, we had just 5 qubits on the cloud. Now we're up to over 100 qubits, right? We broke the 100 qubit barrier last year, and we're looking at 433 this year. So this is going to keep growing and evolving. So what I meant by early is that as these systems evolve, it's great to get in early now as you evolve with them, rather than once everybody is on in and they're working and they've already got their deep knowledge and they're looking at solving their some problems. It's now not so much to say you're late, but you're not getting the early access as you normally would to learn all about these things and kind of lower that learning curve that you would get to be able to apply it.
All right, so you're talking learning curve, early access stuff. We've been throwing around this term for a bit already today, qubit. Could you give our listeners just like a 45-second overview of what a qubit is versus, we all know bits and bytes. So what's a qubit?
Yeah, so just like a bit, a qubit is short for quantum bit, which basically is just what that is, right? It's a quantum representation of a bit, and the difference is, of course, that it not only can represent a unit of information as 0 and a 1, just the same way a bit does. It could do either or. But you can also, as we mentioned earlier about superposition, you can also place it in a state that's a linear combination, basically a combination of the two. And what that means is when you're running an application, let's say on a classical system, you set your bits and then you go, and then you do it. Let's say you're searching through an algorithm or an array. So you set your bit to all zeros to indicate the first cell in that array, and you want to observe something there. It's at the true or false, let's say, and you get the observation. You go, then you set your bit to 1, and you set your bit to 2, and your bits to 3, etc. Obviously the binary representation of those numbers. So you're iterating through those, and so ultimately you're making n number of calls, right, to this particular query that you're running. Now, on a quantum system, what you can do is you can make one query on these things, and those bits, it'll put that in a combination of 0 and 1, and that way when you run it, you get your results back, you're getting a probability result, because the results that's the kind of results you get back. So a probability distribution of whatever the algorithm is looking for. In this case, when we talked about, for example, Grover's algorithm with a satisfiability problem, the result we will get back is an amplitude indicating that the value with the highest amplitude is what we were looking for, and all the other amplitudes were lower. And what I mean by amplitudes is when you put something in superposition, if you look at let's say an XY graph where the X represents the state, so let's say we have a single qubit of 0 and 1, and then you have the amplitude, which is a probability between 0 and 100. So if I set something to 0, it's got 100%, it's going to be a 0. When I set it to 1, it's going to have 100% probability it's going to be 1, because I'm just setting the bit and the qubit rather than nothing else. If I set it in a superposition, what I get back is I'm going to get back the results that say 50% of it is 0 and 50% of it is 1. So I'm going to have 2 bars on this graph, and they're going to be right at halfway, which means that they're in equal superposition. So I put that in a superposition state. That's where I start. Let's say most algorithms you'll see start in this state, and then as they apply their gates or their algorithms, these amplitudes will adjust accordingly, and when you get at that final result, that amplitude state will be in a way that basically represents a response, right? And that's pretty much a little bit of a difference. There's obviously a lot more to that, but this is about as high level I think as I can get it.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. So before you joined, I was telling the audience about Qiskit.org and the Qiskit tutorials, which again are just, in my opinion, very easy now to walk through and start learning things. But is that the best place to start? Like if we have a listener today who has heard of quantum computing, maybe they do a lot of IBM stuff or other technologies, but they've not done quantum computing before. What's Robert Laredo's recommendation on where to start learning about this stuff and where to start collaborating with other people about this stuff?
Yeah,
You
so
just hop on
generally,
the...
yes, generally the best place I always recommend to start is just that a community of people that are also just starting or have just started or are already into it. And that would be obviously the Qiskit community. So it's basically qiskit.org. And when you go there, they have it's a one-stop shop, I always call it, of quantum. I mean, mainly because that's where you can find things on education. We have a lot of courses. In fact, we just doing a summer school. We had some challenges on there. So once you learn, we have obviously a Qiskit textbook where you can learn all of these things for free. Everything is free, of course. There's also some tutorials. There's a YouTube video. We have a YouTube channel, and the YouTube has different channels within them, different playlists, and they're everything from folks that are coming on, invited on from research from all different organizations, talking about the different research they're doing in quantum. You have a developer section. You have an introductory section. So it's basically a great resource for all levels, right? Even if you're just starting, or maybe you've already learned a little bit about it on your own and you want to kind of work a little bit more. They have these Qiskit advocate programs. So for those of you that are really into it and really want to help others as well, you can apply to become a Qiskit advocate. There's a certification you can take. So there's an array of different things that you can really learn in this particular place. So I always recommend starting there. And of course, that's where you also have access to the quantum systems and the IBM quantum platform as well.
Yeah, that's great. I always love talking about the Qiskit website, and in particular, down in that lower right, I know we had people in the chat asking about the Slack channel, but for those listening on Twitter, it's qiskit.org. If you go down to like the lower right, you'll see a link to some Twitter and some Medium spaces, as well as a Qiskit Slack channel. Now you hop in the Qiskit Slack channel, you're going to find people who are quantum experts, but you're also going to find people who are quantum noobs and just getting started with this stuff as well. So a really great community channel for us. But with that, we're approaching the top of the hour. Robert, thank you so much for having us again. Bit of a fanboy, really a fan of your work and everything the IBM Q and quantum teams are doing. So thank you so much for stopping by, and hope you have a great day. So thank you.
Thank you.
Likewise.
Robert.
Thank you, everybody. Take care. Yep. Have a good weekend. Be safe, all. Bye.
You bet. Thank you. So our next speaker up, as well as Klaus Ibsen. He's going to be joining us to talk a little bit about Apache Camel. I just sent him an invite to speak on Twitter Space. Hopefully he's promoted shortly, sees that and comes on. Some of you, people who listen to me talk a lot about, just IBMI stuff in general, you've probably heard me mention Apache Camel at least a time or two. And the reason I love Apache Camel is because it is such a powerful technology for integrating things in. So I'm really glad that we can have Klaus joining us today to tell us a little bit more about Apache Camel. And so Klaus, I see you're in as speaker now. Let's start. I'll give you the proverbial mic. Tell our listeners today about Klaus and what you do and what excites you.
Thank you very much. Yes, so my name is Klaus Ibsen. I'm based in Denmark. I've been working in the IT industry for 25 years. Actually, my first professional job was to work on IBM mainframes, the great AS400. I did programming in...
I told you I would play it.
Sorry,
that said AS400. I told you I played.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
But there was the time reference. He was talking the past. It's okay.
IBMI. Yes. So it was green terminals and everything like that. And it was before the year 2000, so I was working on the year 2000 situation. But it was awesome work that shifted me to later into other positions. And I got hold on Java in the starts of 2000, and I kind of got into consultancy and became an integration consultant, and was dipping my toes around in Denmark, and I was contracted at a time to work in China, in Shanghai, for a year or so, and came back to Denmark. And the reason for that is that eventually led me to integration frameworks that were open source, that wasn't proprietary, And that led me to the early days when I discovered Apache Camel 15 years ago. And that's where my current position is. I am the tech lead on Apache Camel, employed by Red Hat for over 10 years, doing full-time Camel.
That's awesome. So just to back up on your history there for a second, did you essentially start your professional career then on the predecessor to IBMI?
Yes. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
So my first paycheck was based on, IBMI work.
Running query 400s and green screen stuff. That's awesome. That's amazing.
I promise you can say AS400 again. I won't make the noise. I promise.
Oh yeah. You were sending compile jobs to a print queue and then reading the response from the print queue, and okay, that's the compile error, and you have registries to store computations, and yeah, it was a great learning experience. And then you can admire that people have been doing this for many years, and that they are building real enterprise systems that are running the business, core systems and whatnot.
Yeah,
it wasn't fancy stuff.
Yeah. So Klaus, I've never looked at the actual Git change history. Are you one of the original authors of the JT400 component for Apache Camel?
Oh, now you're taking me back to history. Yes, I've certainly been picking it up. Whether or not my original author or not, I may be, I may not, because it could have been at a time where I actually had an access to an AS400 system, so I could use it for real life. But I am getting closer to the 50 than the 40s now, so there are things that escape my mind now. But I'm really happy that it's useful today, and that Jesse, you have picked it up and doing the great work with it.
Yeah, and I love seeing it because more and more I hear people using it for various integration tasks with the platform, using that JT400 component. And then of course there's components that aren't necessarily IBMI components that also of course work with IBMI just like other platforms, right? There's the JDBC component, do anything DB2. There's the file component. There's just all kinds of things that really don't care about platform that also still just work really well on IBMI. So
wow, yeah. Well, that's powers to the Java, right? And the IBM folks that are able to support that to IBMI.
Yeah, that's amazing. So we have a couple hundred listeners in today, Klaus. So could you just give everybody a quick overview of what Apache Camel is for those that perhaps are hearing about it for the first time?
Wow, you're throwing the hardball questions currently.
No, just don't say that bad word.
No. Well, it's a thing I have tried to perfection for 15 years. I never got it right. So I think actually, in essence, Camel is a Java-based integration framework. So yes, you use it for integration. There are a few key concepts or core concepts in Camel that makes it stand out or really great. One is the breadth of components. They're called components in Camel, but you might as well just think them as connectors or adapters. So basically, if you need to connect any system to another system, any kind of system, there is a great chance there is a Camel component that can do that. And if there's not, then Camel is open source. You can build a component if needs to be. The second thing is that with Camel, then you'd use it to integrate systems, and then you need to specify how these systems are to be integrated. And in Camel, there's a concept called a route. Or you can also use the term integration flow for that. So basically, to code, if you will, or describe how the system is integrated, how messages are passed from one system to another. And literally, that is a very high-level abstraction in Camel. So basically, the simplest integration you can do is just from A to B. That's literally one line of code that you can write and compile and run with Camel. Of course, in real life there are more business needs that has more challenging integration than just from A to B. So luckily, 15 years ago, a book was published with solution or pattern for that. They call it enterprise integration patterns. So basically, what you give Camel exposes these patterns for you, so you can code these integration, use these design patterns. And Camel is not invented a new language for that. It's not a meta language or something like that. It's basically just standard Java. So you just write Java code. So you say from A to B, that's basically Java. You can also split and aggregate. And again, these are just standard Java. So the compiler and all the tooling can assist you. And if you're not into so much of Java, as a coding, which is a trend currently, with the low code movement and whatnot, the same routes can be equally implemented or in another language, markup language like XML. That is also very powerful. And what we see in the use case is that end users of Camel, there are a lot of end users that are also using XML. So it's not like there's a clear-cut winner that everybody's using Java. No, you can easily use XML as well. And in recent time, we also added a new DSL for, well, there I have to say it, maybe you have to sound the horn, YAML.
Oh yeah.
Don't give Liam reasons to press the button, please.
It's okay. I refrain when you said XML. I refrained. So.
Okay.
I was actually expecting it at XML. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So everybody needs yelling at my what is it called? YAML stand for yelling at my laptop. Well, the reason is, of course, Kubernetes and all the YAML there, so it's been introduced. But anyway, what is still the tributes to Camel is that they're on equal footing. So it's not like, okay, Java is the most performant and powerful and whatnot, and XML is second best, and YAML is third best, and so on. No, what happens is that when Camel executes your routes, it actually passes what you code in these Camel routes, and then it builds a runtime model of that is 100% Java-based code. So everything is the same as when you run it at runtime for production, etc. Okay, that's not my best explanation for Camel.
No, that was good. I mean, you touched on the main point, which is, for anybody first hearing about what Camel is, if you just Google, Apache Camel components, you'll see this huge list of components, as Camel calls it. And like Klaus said, you can call them connectors or adapters or something. And the key takeaway, if you've never heard of Camel before, is that anything for which there is a component out there, it has connector, adapter, you can connect to anything else for which there's a component out there, right? And when you start realizing the power there, just with all these components out of the box, and then Klaus, you also touched on something else that I thought was really important as well, because you mentioned, if there's something else that you need to do, something custom you need to do, you can write your own component, or even just inject your own little snippets of code, right? Like,
yes.
You can.
Absolutely, and that's from the get-go when I got involved with Camel, and sort of what led me there, or led my client there, is also a bit frustration with existing products that were out there in the space. And this is, before open source was so dominating and things like that. It was that these products were sort of like a closed world. You're only supposed to be used in a specific way, and doing anything custom was sort of like an exception. Is really hard to do, or you had to really beg for it to be able to do that, or even write some code that could be used. They were trying to shield you from all of that, and then in a perfect world that might be okay, but all my clients, that it's not a perfect world. All the data that flows from A to B may not. Well, on paper they might adhere to a specific standard, but in reality there were always some corner cases and things like that. So what we needed is to give the developers the power. So now, this is the mental picture I have for everything with this philosophy of Camel, is that the cursor must be blinking. So the idea is that with a cursor, as a developer or a DevOps guy, whatever, you can always write something. You always type in something on a keyboard to be in control. And that means, as Jesse said, if the out-of-the-box component cannot function to your needs, then you can extend it, or you can submit a pull request to the community, to add a new feature or make it do what you need. And we are very welcoming. But also, any other areas in Camel, there are many different places where we have interfaces. So it's very easy to add a custom snippet of code that can do something that you need to do in Camel.
Yeah, and I'll share one of my more recent Camel stories, and I have plenty as more and more people have been using it on IBMI. I had somebody talk to us. They said they were working for about a month, not full time, but they're trying for about a month to get some kind of integration working. It was a simple integration, but they wanted to integrate with Google PubSub. And eventually this ends up in my inbox. And I'll be honest, first thing I did was Google PubSub. I didn't even know that existed. Maybe that's embarrassing to admit. Like, what is this? But then the second thing I did, of course, is I pull up that components list for Apache Camel, and yep, there's a Google PubSub component for Camel. And I pointed them at that, and I think they said it took them like 45 minutes to an hour to piece together the thing they needed, because they just were able to pull in this PubSub component and go. Right?
Yeah, it's awesome. And well, we've seen, in recent time, a lot of these cloud vendors. They have a ton of new service coming out, and it can be hard to track everything, right, and know everything. And we come with more than 300 components. I don't know the ins and out of everything of everyone, right? But it's great to see community users contribute them as well. And if there's a Camel component, as Jesse says, then there's a good chance there's a number of users that have been used it and tried it out, and they're using it in production and whatnot. So you're not sort of like starting from scratch, from zero. And at the end of the day, the source code is available. Everybody can take a peek at it. And also, you might also use this as inspiration. Okay, you may not want to use Camel in some situations, but you can still look at the Camel component, see how that Camel implements and use this component, because then you can see, okay, Camel, uses this and this to actually integrate or send a message to that system. Okay, then I can also do it on myself.
That's a great point. Another question just related to that whole, extensibility. It's in a way this low code thing. You can extend it with your own code as much as you want. One of the other common questions I get is about IDEs. Like, are there good tools or IDEs that you recommend for doing Apache Camel stuff?
Yes, so I'm really happy that in recent years that there has been an uptake on development on Camel tooling. There are sort of two sets of tools currently. Well, three sets, but for specific IDEs, then there's a VS Code plugins. So standard plugins for VS Code you can find in this marketplace.
That's my jam.
Yes, it's based on a standard called language server protocol, which means that actually the same tool could potentially also work in other IDEs that supports LSP, which is a huge range of tools. Does even what is it called, VIM and other very low level tools. Another tool is IntelliJ. That they don't support LSP, so we have a custom Camel component for that. Actually, one I founded many years ago, but there's a number of other Camel contributors that are contributing and recently have improved these tools a lot. And in the last 6 months or so, we have finally added Camel debugging in these tools. For users that have been using Camel, they may know that debugging Camel routes is not easy, because it kind of ties back to what I started in the beginning, is that essentially when you define or code your Camel routes, then Camel will actually sort of interpret that at boot time and then build internal route model that is actually executed. So what you have coded and what is actually executed at runtime are not necessarily the same. So to make a debugging, that is actually a bit harder to do with Java. But these tools have a debugging support, so you can do step by step debugging your Camel routes and jump into sub routes and things like that, just like a regular debugger can do.
Yeah, that's super powerful. And even personally, I used to just use Eclipse and Java support for doing Camel stuff, but since I've used the Apache Camel plugins for VS Code, personally, I love those. Those are great stuff, and that's
absolutely. And another thing is that when you use Camel, you don't well, a lot of the time you're not actually writing too much, let's say, standard Java code. You end up, more configuring Camel endpoints and ERP patterns and things like that. And the standard way so far, the dominating way to do that is basically do that in a quick way using configuration using string, text-based configuration, which a compiler cannot compile and report errors for. So the tooling support there has not been as powerful as standard coding. But these new plugins they have all that baked in, so the tools can now give you code assistance for every Camel configuration you have everywhere, and that's really, really awesome. And they also allows you to see the documentation as if it was sort of like a Java doc tooltip coming up. So you have everything at your hands now.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so a lot of IBMI folk, when they're running Camel on IBMI or even adjacent to IBMI, they're running Camel standalone, I think is the proper term, which is essentially, it's just a Java package and you can build a jar file and you run it with the Java command. We did have a question in the chat about Camel K, which brings up a whole topic of, there's various ways to run Apache Camel besides just this standalone Java thing. So, and in the last few minutes, can you just describe what's Camel K? Why should somebody care? And how else can you deploy this thing?
Okay, that's a great topic, and it's also a full session to get to the bottom of what Camel K is.
Yeah, fair.
so Camel K with a K, not a C, is Camel for Kubernetes. But it takes a whole different approach because it does in a, let's say, a productless way, where basically you just focus on the integration, a single file. That was the concept. Then you can deploy. When you deploy, you don't actually, let's say, compile anything. You don't produce a jar files or whatever. You basically just deploy the code, as literal text that goes into the Kubernetes cluster. And then inside the cluster, you have a Camel K operator that has all the master defaults. The operator is then responsible for building a container image that then runs with Camel. It has the right set of dependencies. That does the full yard of all of that. So basically allows you to super easily take some Camel routes, from A to B, put it into a Java file, or XML file, a YAML file, whatever you want it, or a GUI file, whatever, and basically say Camel run and the name of the file. Then that gets shifted into Kubernetes and the operator takes care of everything. That's really an awesome way of getting started with Camel, and that's a segue just to, I will give a teaser for what we've been working with, is to have the same experience, but for standard Java. And there's no Kubernetes, there's no Camel K, there's no whatever cloud. It's just standard Java. It's what we call Camel JBag. So you can get the similar experience of that. And if I recommend people to take a look at that, it's introduced, in Camel 3.18, where that's the latest release.
Right. That's awesome. So that's actually a really great segue into our next topic. We have a couple of folks here to talk about some container development, and again, very, very adjacent to what you're finishing up on, Klaus. But I do want to say, Klaus, thanks for joining. I hope to see you at some more conferences and stuff upcoming. But again, a huge thanks to all the great work you've done with Apache Camel. I love the technology, and of course, a huge thanks to all the other folks at Red Hat and in the Apache community who keep this stuff going. So thank you a bunch, and thanks for joining us today.
Thank you,
very much
Klaus.
for having me.
I think you've made Jesse's day.
Yeah,
I'm
I'm giddy now. I got to talk to Klaus.
Yeah. Take care.
All right, thank you. All right, so next up, Klaus was talking about Kubernetes and containers, and we have Andy Ewens joining us as a speaker. Nick Ewens just popped in as well, so welcome the Ewenses, if that's the proper way to make that plural.
But
the Ewenses. I guess we'll start up. I'll turn the proverbial mic over to you guys for some introduction. Just for the sake of randomness, Nick, I'll let you go first.
Cool, excellent. I'll tell you what. Why don't I introduce Andy, and he can do likewise back to me.
Wow,
that works.
I like this style a lot.
Yeah.
So as Andy is IBM through and through. He started on IBM mid-range machines in the early 80s. getting involved in all aspects of the machine, programming to installations and hardware. He's now mainly involved in open source on the IBM I, still asking the question of whether it's going to catch on. And a little piece of it.
Ouch.
And a little piece of it.
Well, I know where you can find some really great videos on open source. For those not getting the inside joke, Andy and Nick, I think you help with those as well. Produce a lot of fantastic tutorial videos for doing open source and a bunch of other IBM stuff as well. So thank you for that. True champion behavior. So sorry to interrupt. Go ahead.
No, not at all. I was just going to say, if you ever want to completely lose 6 hours of your day, you can also ask Andy a story about the Navy.
Yeah.
Rightio. I better say something nice about Nick. What can I say? Nick's been in IT for over 20 years. One of my first recollections of Nick getting into technology was in the 80s when he cut a hole in his bedroom room so we could play two-player Doom.
Nice.
Why not?
Nice.
As well as working for FormerServe, Nick has worked for some big players, working at GlaxoSmithKline, NatWest Bank, and now works at Microsoft as their Health Life Sciences EMEA engineering manager. So,
that sounds exciting.
Is it, Nick? No comment at the moment.
No comment, Your Honor.
We won't. Yeah, Nick, we won't make you say anything. That's okay. We stay quiet.
So in this informal chat, we're just going to have a talk about how we started using containers for development. Let me firstly state, we're not talking about Merlin. We certainly don't need any wizards for our coding, or maybe we do. Let me give you a bit of background of where we're coming from on this. I like a good story, or a bit, as we say in the Navy. FormerServe worked on a project for a client over 15 years ago. It was a PHP project that ran on the IBM I and accessed the DB2 for our database. Nothing more than that, really. Nobody had touched this since our initial development, and now they needed updating it. After saying, of course, we can help, as you always do for clients, the reality and task ahead seemed a bit daunting. We hadn't picked this up for a long while. We really needed a stable environment where we could both work, knowing we both had the same environment as the customer's requirements.
Yeah, and the key was we didn't really want to waste a massive amount of time setting the environment up, making sure everything's on the right version, loading it onto however many laptops and desktops or wherever we would be working at that point.
Yeah, we both like the idea of setting it up once, all having the same config and all being able to use it. So what did we decide to use then, Nick?
After a bit of investigation, a bit of digging around, it was decided that we'd use Visual Studio Code with Docker development containers. Yeah, because, well, firstly, we all like something that's free. VS Code was an obvious choice for us because we've been using it for many years, so it seemed crazy to use anything else.
So are you using the VS Code extensions for container development then?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Nice. Yeah, I just installed those last week, actually. Looking forward to getting my feet wet with those.
Very useful, very useful. So a bit about Docker first. For those that don't know it, Docker is a software platform that allows you to build, test, deploy applications very, very quickly. It is speed is its big plus. Docker packages are standardized objects called containers that have everything you need in there to allow your software to be developed and run. Docker runs on Windows, but it runs even better in WSL, Windows Subsystem for Linux. So when you install Docker, it does ask you whether you want it to run in Windows or WSL. It does default to WSL. So if VS Code uses Docker containers for development, do you need to be a Docker expert to use these?
No, not at all. You need Docker installed on your PC or your Mac or whatever kind of development platform you're using, and then VS Code does all the work for you.
So after we install Docker, what's next?
So Docker's going to be running locally on your development machine. A quick run of Docker version from a shell will tell you if it's running or if it's not. Once Docker's running, it's back into VS Code. Install the extension, which is called Remote Containers from Microsoft. And then we need to configure our project to use remote containers. There are two ways you can do this. You can either do the auto config way or the manual way if you want something really bespoke. But personally, I'm a nice lazy developer, so the auto config way is the best for me. When you open your project in VS Code, from the command palette, you type add dev container, configure, and then the configuration files, and it will take you through all of the options that you've got. For example, it will recognize if it's a Node.js project, and it will ask you what version of Node you need. Once you've answered all of the questions, it will recreate a couple of files for you under a .dev container folder. In this directory, there are two files, mostly. One is a dev container.json file, and the other is a traditional Docker file. The Docker file in Docker World determines what should be in the container, and the dev container.json is used by VS Code to work out how to start the container, how to build it, and what to do after it's been created. These are both text files, so you can open them up, you can change them, and more than likely, if you're me, open them up, change them, and break them. For example, you could go in and change your Node version from 16 to 18 just by editing the text file. Once the project has been set up for containers, you push it to GitHub, and then the next developer has their whole development environment ready to go as soon as they clone that repo down onto their machine.
Yeah, very, very handy. What about the IBM specific components extensions then, Nick, like Liam's excellent code for IBM I extension? Can they be loaded so we can connect to our server boxes from within the container?
Absolutely. Any extension and all of its settings can just get loaded up in the configuration files. So every developer, when they pull that repo down, will have a VS Code with the right extensions and all of the connections to whatever servers you need, all set up, ready to go. So it's a fully fledged VS Code development environment, yeah, out of the box.
Okay, so I have a question for you.
Go for it.
So what you're suggesting, and this is mostly for clarification for those that are listening. So instead of me writing Node.js based on what I've installed onto my MacBook, I'm instead running a Docker container, which is, I'm connecting to from VS Code, and then Node.js is running inside of that container instead of me running it on my laptop.
100%.
Would you say that's about right?
100%.
Absolutely.
So as well as Node, because I could, in theory, it's a container, right? So I can install anything I want into this container, right? So would you also say it's viable that I could install a database into my container as well?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You can have that working alongside. Databases are slightly different. So you'd have a container for your database. So if you're using, for instance, MariaDB, you could have a Docker instance for that and link the two together. So then if you're doing any development, you're updating your test database, whatever, that goes into there. It goes into there. And that can be used by 3 or 4 developers. So if I update it with some configuration files, whatever, they'll be there for you to see once you pulled it down from GitHub or wherever.
Okay. So I'd have another developer who's on my team clone the repository, and the only thing they really need to install onto their machine is Visual Studio Code, right? Because
and Docker,
in theory, and of course, and Docker, right? So, and of course, when it's the actual extension for remote, is it the remote repositories one, or is it the Docker extension? Is it the actual Docker extension?
No, it's the Microsoft one that does all the work for you in VS Code. Okay.
So I install it, and then it runs and connects my VS Code instance to be inside of the container.
Yeah, absolutely.
So everything that I'm writing, everything that I'm typing, all the code that I'm working on is happening inside of that container, basically.
Yep, 100%. You do your usual. Sorry, Lou.
no, I could completely break it, right? And because it's Docker, it's not really affecting any of my other machine. I could just set it up again and have a fresh Docker instance ready to go.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely, mate.
And what were you going to say? I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Who knows?
That's a great question.
No, I mean
the real strength.
So I mean, the strength is once you've configured it as a Docker development container, I pull it down. The first thing that VS Code says is, "Oh, you've got some Docker config files here. Do you want to open this up in the dev container, the Docker container?" So that tells you straight away, yes, I want to do that. Once it's all up and loaded, it was saying, "Oh, you're using port number 123 on this. Do you want to open a browser to port number 123?" So you can do front ends, you can do back ends, whatever. It doesn't make any difference. Just because you're working on a container, you haven't got MariaDB on there. You haven't got Python, Node, IIS, MS SQL, and all the rest of them there. They're all in that container.
And it's completely automated for the developers. So
that's
really what the key point is.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and the amount of time we've set up, a developer's machine, and then that breaks and he gets a new laptop and we have to go through the whole process again. It's never ending. It really is. So these are a great way to get around that.
And one of the keys for me, the value add, is that modern software development you don't really now get a developer who is single language proficient, right? So in the open source world, you might today I might be working on Node, and then tomorrow there's a problem with a Rust script or a C# script or something that is working in a microservice somewhere. This means that I don't have to have my working machine, my desktop, on the right version for every application that I'm supporting. All I need to do is pull that repo down onto my machine, and I've got the ability to go in and start coding straight away.
Love that. So I've done something similar, but just without having to install VS Code and Docker, because you can use the same Docker configuration files and open it into a code space right away. So Docker and VS Code is absolutely the way to do it. Any development. I mean, it's just so convenient. But my all-time favorite thing to do is not even install VS Code and not even install Docker. It's just to, and I tell everybody about this, but you can open up any repository on GitHub into a code space, which is a container that's running in, somewhere in some GitHub servers, and it will let you run your Node app, run your Postgres database, run any open port, as you suggested, without even installing anything. That is my all-time favorite piece of technology. I just love the fact that containers are excellent, but what that's done is developing in the web has removed the need to even install anything at all. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah,
I couldn't agree more. The code space piece is interesting because it's running off of the same Docker files, right? So it's the same under the skin. So if you've got a repository, you create your dev container and then you push it back up into GitHub. Someone then opens that in code space. They're opening that same container, really. So all of the work that you've done to set it up really then allows someone to develop in VS Code or code spaces and both be on exactly the same developer experience. And they don't even really have to have a machine. It takes it to the point where with code spaces, you could develop using a tablet. If you just need to make a couple of minor changes and commit it back in, then you don't really need a machine.
Yeah, that really blows my mind. So, okay, I want to talk more about real world examples now, because we understand how it works. We have Docker installed and we have VS Code, and VS Code can reach in and run based on our Docker environment. But what in the terms of IBMI, at least, where can we use this to actually, develop applications that eventually, run in the cloud talking to DB2, or even run on IBM. I have some examples that I'm going to give, but I'm curious if you have any real world examples to share as well.
Do you want to take that, Andy? Do you want me to?
No, you have a go. Carry on there, Nick.
So real world examples from our kind of client set, FormaServe, really is all around those open source languages. So having everything running on the IFS, being able to create your Git repository around that, and then being able to put it down is all is pretty much where this strength is and where we see them the most use in our client set. I haven't really seen this being used in a RPG context. I mean, in theory, with the VS Code extension, you could wrap that up with a dev container that would allow you to code a node front end and have the IBM I extension all set up with a connection to your machine and a filter to the specific source that you want. I haven't seen that yet.
Yeah, I mean, we have used it like that, but we haven't seen clients using it like that. I must admit, we've picked this up within the last year. We've been starting going this way. So I mean, we are new to this as well, and we're learning all the way. It just gives us a different advantage. It's just another tool we can use that it gets us developing quicker.
Absolutely. Oh, for sure.
100%. Yeah, 100%.
So I actually do have a real world example where it doesn't involve RPG too much, but it does involve DB2.
Yeah.
So pre IBM, obviously, worked for myself. So I had clients, and I had one client specifically who were building, I think they had a React app on the front end. They had, I think, 4 different Node apps running on the back end, I think for different parts of the business. And just like you explained, that each of those had a Docker file, right? So when it was running in the cloud, and we'll get to that in a moment, it already knew what needed to be installed just to get running right away, and that included the developer environment. So
yep.
When this client, when this company hired new people, all they had to do was, as you suggested, was pretty much download VS Code, let VS Code make recommendations to install Docker, install the extension, and they're already away. And what's really nice about doing it this way, and especially when it comes to DB2 for I, is that as of late, IBM, you can now install the driver for DB2 for I through, oh God, what is it?
Just through Yum or apt.
Yeah, apps. Yeah,
Apps. Absolutely.
You can absolutely wget the driver and apt install it through a Docker container. You haven't been able to do that until this year.
Yeah.
That really changes the game, because now there's no manual steps anymore. You can totally automate the entire development environment. But then there's the whole production environment too, because you can now use the same Docker container, which you might use for development, to also run it in production too, with obviously maybe some different flags on the setup. But you can do the entire life cycle through a Docker container, which is incredible. In terms of deploying an app, that's quite incredible, I would say. So I really have enjoyed that.
Yeah, definitely. The containerization as a whole gives you a lot more stability to your app development process. I mean, essentially, probably for the first time, you can guarantee that at the point you build your container up front and then deploy it through your testing environment, that's not changing. You're going to test exactly the same thing that you deploy into production. No one's going to touch it in the middle. And with versioning, you're just going to increment on top of it each time.
Right. Love it. Love that. So, and what's really nice is that, pretty much every cloud platform now supports a Docker container and a Docker registry nonetheless. So it's really easy for you to just point to a repository and have the cloud environment automatically configure your environment just based on configuration. And I mean, I've used Heroku and Azure to do it, and I'm damn well sure AWS and Google Cloud can do the same. It's quite incredible, especially because now that finally we have the driver, it's so so incredibly nice just to talk to DB2 with no effort whatsoever.
That makes
Kev. Thanks, Kev.
Yeah, that makes such a difference.
It does. Yeah, I totally agree.
You know, like earlier I mentioned, I have a little sample up in GitHub that does a 3-sat Boolean satisfiability problem with Quantum, right? But it's all just encapsulated essentially in a Docker file. That anybody can just go build and run. And it's
it is great.
It's such a simple improvement, but I'm glad we finally just have that database connectivity so easily available and easy enough to tie into this stuff.
100%. Yeah, very good. One other way we use dev containers here is for our training modules. We have dev containers set up for each of our course. So a Node 18 course with all the training material we need to run that course, all the examples, all the exercises, all the prereqs are in that container. So the students don't spend time, valuable teaching time, setting up their machines. They just download that container and we're ready to go. Very handy.
Yeah. Wow. Well, so we are kind of getting close to an end. So I was wondering if there was something that the two of you would like to close out with, actually. So while you have the time.
One thing about the Docker side of things on the PC, though, you got to watch your disk space. You know, as a minus point, these Docker components can take up a lot of space. But again, you know, you can put these on the web or you can put them in GitHub. You know, it's entirely up to you. But it's worth keeping an eye on. And just something to mention there, really.
Oh, great point. I think the Docker UI even actually has a column on the list where it says how much space it's using, right? If you use the Docker UI.
Yeah, there's an extension for Docker space, Docker usage or something like that. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. Cool.
No,
Nick, how about you?
I think he's gone.
No, I think there's nothing from me. Thanks.
No, thank you for letting us have a talk about it. Hopefully this gives somebody, you know, the idea of what's out there these days. Because times have certainly changed from the good old AS400 RPG days. You know, it's long used to.
Oh, for sure. Oh yeah, it's no surprise there, is it?
No.
Oh wait, you said AS400.
You got to play the sound. You got to play the sound.
I was talking about the AS400. Did I mention RPG too?
You know what? I'll give you a different one. You can have that one.
That's better. I'm happy now, Liam.
Yep. Oh, good. All right. Well, I really appreciate the two of you coming on. I mean, it's definitely very informative. So, and I'll split this up, and when it's on YouTube, just this part, I'll send it over to you guys so you can share it around.
That's great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Cheers.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks, Andy.
Thank you. All right, next speaker up is Michael Dawson. Michael's in the space. I just invited him to be a speaker as well, so hopefully he's on deck shortly.
Yeah, this is a topic I'm very excited for. So I love Node. It's my jam. Jesse loves Camel, and I love Node.
I love Node as well. Some of you know that my default like Zoom virtual background is just a plain white background with the Node.js logo and the Camel logo. Those are probably my two favorite technologies these days, especially in the IBM space. So we have Michael Dawson on deck. So Michael, welcome in.
Thanks.
Welcome in.
Thanks for having me. Great to be here, and it's good to follow actually some of the previous discussion about containers and all that. It's a really interesting thing, and I think it fits well with what I see in terms of, you know, Node.js developers and how people do some development there as well. So maybe we can loop back to that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. We absolutely can. I'm sure, because I think you well know that Node.js fits perfectly in with that space. So, so I'll say thank you for being here. I'm so grateful for that more than anything. I wanted to ask you something because I know that you're on the steering committee for Node.
Yep.
And I'm curious because last time I spoke with you, you were working at IBM, and I haven't spoken to you for some years. But now you're at Red Hat, and I know that because I sent the invite to the wrong email address.
Right.
So, so I'm wondering how or if that transition for you has impacted your role in the steering committee, or if it's impacted your role, in just using and developing Node.js at all.
So I can fill in the history. It was about 2 years ago that actually the whole Node team from IBM moved over to Red Hat. So we kept some of the same missions. We've grown a few other missions because we joined with an existing Node team at Red Hat. And it was done to sort of bring two teams that were working, independently together, so that we could have one group that was kind of leading the charge for Node.js, both at Red Hat but also at IBM. So I still work with teams at IBM. I still work very closely with Jesse, and we're still very actively involved in the community. So I'm still on the technical steering committee and acting as the chair. So that move really didn't change too much in terms of, our community involvement, or even our ability to collaborate with people at IBM. But it has given me, the ability to better get to know the people at Red Hat, the teams that are working things, and actually bring the efforts across the two companies together.
Right. Yeah. So on the note of collaborative efforts, Michael, there's this thing called the Reference Architecture Working Group, I believe. Can you tell the listeners what that is, for those who haven't heard of it?
Yeah, that's actually a perfect example. And I'll step back a little bit and sort of maybe introduce the problem. I think the Node ecosystem is great because it gives you a lot of choice. There's like 2 million packages on NPM now and growing. And so you can be very effective by reusing code that's out there, which is good. But almost once you get beyond a certain point, too much choice is actually a challenge. And from a number of different ways. One, if you're just starting, it's like, well, what do I choose? What am I going, what's going to be successful? What have other people been successful with? Because, if there's 10 choices, there's probably a couple good ones and some other ones which are more experimental or whatever. The other aspect is that even if you can choose one which is great for you, if everybody in your company chooses something different, that's actually going to, I think, cost you a lot more money in the end. There's a certain investment in terms of, sort of brain power and corporate knowledge and everything that it takes to support any one of these components that you use. Even though you save quite a bit by not having had to develop them themselves, you still have expertise around using them, and hopefully also giving back to the community that you're depending on. So there's still value in my mind in choosing like a common set within your company. And I think it's kind of the 80-20 rule, right? If I'm developing a new application, there's probably like 20% where it's really important that I pick the most optimized, best thing that's really going to make my app stand out. And in that 20%, I may want to, stretch the boundaries, try new things, do new things. But the other 80%, it probably, what you really want is just something is tried and true. You share common experience. You can share a common experience with other people in your company, and just leverage what works in that other 80%. And that's where it'd be great to be able to have that 80%. So that's a very long introduction to the reference architecture, which is within Red Hat and IBM, we have that same challenge. Lots of groups and teams using Node, and how do we sort of maximize the likelihood that we choose things which we're going to be successful with, and that we have a common set if possible. So the reference architecture is a joint effort between IBM and Red Hat. We get together, every 2 weeks. We have a public repo, so it's shared publicly. And what we've done is we've brought together people who have worked in our large Node deployments. So that includes things like the weather company. It's a Kubernetes-based deployment with, I think, 6 geos and hundreds of workers, all running Node.js. We brought together our consulting teams, both at Red Hat and IBM, who work with people doing deployments, our Node team who work in the community to build Node, and discussed a whole bunch of different topics you know, in terms of like, you know, what web frameworks would we use? What loggers would we use? What, you know, how would we build good containers? All of those topics. And we've documented what our experience is in a way to say, you know, this is what's worked for us. It's not necessarily the best or the only way of doing things, but like if you want to choose a good option that's been successful within an organization like IBM or Red Hat that you probably trust, here's a good starting point, and here's something good to choose. And I found that it's actually really good in a number of ways. One, it's been a great learning opportunity for all of us involved, but it's also been really great when we talk to customers and they say, well, okay, we're having some challenge building our containers. You know, for example, you know, we were talking to one customer about vulnerabilities and how you manage those vulnerabilities. And it was great to be able to point them to a section in our building containers that talks about like using a base image as a way to reduce the sort of different numbers of vulnerabilities that you're going to have to deal with, and how to update like once across projects and stuff like that. So it's a great place and reference that I find to point people to say, hey, well, this is what's worked for us. You know, if you want to check it out and maybe consider adopting that.
Right, that's rocking. Well, and you mentioned another thing that I think is kind of just a cool gem of information that a lot of people don't necessarily know, which is, you know, a lot of the plumbing and the infrastructure behind Node.js itself is powered by, you know, the blood, sweat, and tears of IBM and or Red Hat folks, and has been for quite a number of years, right? Like if you go to nodejs.org and go download something, that was built by your team, right?
Oh, definitely. Like you know, we've been involved, I think, pretty much from, well, the last 5 to 7 years I've been involved, and the team was involved a little bit before then, which is pretty much from the beginning when it came together as an you know, open source project. It was originally the Node Foundation as a level playing field, but yeah, we are very active in there, and you know, we work hard, you know, in particular for the IBMI community. You know, we work hard to make sure that we get as much testing and validation on our platforms as part of the regular community CIs, but it includes IBMI, Power, S390. So we're active. You know, for example, the build group is a very good example where, you know, we have Richard Lau. You'll see that he did a lot of the work when we had to say choose new platforms on Linux, on AIX, on actually, and we help out, you know, on other things like Mac OS as well. Like what versions will we support for the new version of Node.js, and all the work that goes into that in terms of like spinning up new machines. The CI that we have for Node.js is like over 100, 150 machines. We run PRs across all the different platforms. And so that's a lot of work which we definitely support. We've been very active in releases from the very beginning. We understood that, you know, open source is great for moving fast and getting things to people into people's hands quickly, and Node still really focuses on that. But at the same time, the more it gets used in the enterprise, the sort of stability and some length of long-term support is needed. So, you know, we help define the LTS release process, which is you know, there's a new current built issued every 6 months. Every October, the even LTS is promoted to even current is promoted to LTS, and at that point it gets 30 months of support. So it's a time, you know, it's not as long as some, you know, older runtimes would perhaps provide. In terms of support, like 7 years is not that long, but it is, you know, a good number of years. And there's overlaps, of course, between the LTS, so you can move up and upgrade. So we helped to build, you know, what we thought was a good and solid LTS approach within the project, as well as being involved in doing releases and helping to get those releases out. So yeah, I think as Jesse said, that is a key thing, and sometimes is underappreciated that we are very active across the project in those key aspects of, you know, build, release, security, as well as contributing to, you know, the future looking things and features and that kind of stuff, but very active. And I think that's what makes Red Hat or IBM like a really good partner for your Node deployments, because we've got that insight. And if we need to suggest things, to advocate for features or whatever that our customers need, we're well placed to do that.
What I really like about what you said is that a lot of IBMI customers, it's specifically, are looking for the affirmation that what they're using is secure, and it's it has the support. And I mean, I think you describing the amount of machines that it gets built on, the amount of pull requests that get pulled, and the amount of reviewing that goes in to the ecosystem, at least the base ecosystem,
Yep.
is quite significant. And I think that is, people need to hear that, because when choosing new technology, I think that a lot of people, when they hear about Node, especially in the IBMI industry, all they hear about is, oh, NPM is so bad, it's got all these issues, but they don't
Right.
really understand that. But beneath that is actually quite a secure and well looked after and oiled ecosystem. That's part of the reason that I love Node so much.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah. I'll add to that the currents and the LTSs, it's very well thought out in terms of we still get changes coming in quickly, but there's sort of a baking time as you go from, people can get nightlies and get them right away, or they can go to the currents, and some people use them and we get feedback from those currents, and we don't flow changes through. We sort of stage them so that hopefully by the time they get to an LTS, we've caught most of the problems in currents and so forth. So as you move to an LTS, which is what I recommend for people in production, you get all that testing, and you sort of also get the baking time in the earlier phases to minimize problems. I think the other thing I'd add in terms of what you just mentioned is, there's the aspect of, the project does a good job on top of these different things, but also, Node is actually very widely used. If you looked at the OSSF, which I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but it's the Open Source Security Foundation, they look at open source projects, and look at, what's most critical to the overall ecosystem. And Node came out pretty much right at the top. And that's because of its broad use, right? It's that it's used broadly across the ecosystem, and that it's very important. So, but I think that broad use is also one of the things that should, if you're looking at a new technology, everybody loves the newest, shiniest thing. And it's fun to try out and stuff like that. But I think it's, personally, I like to stick with things that have that broad use, because, they're going to have the staying power. And it comes back to that 80-20, do your real sort of more leading edge work in the 20% where it really matters, and otherwise stick to things that are fairly well, tried and true. Not that Node isn't leading edge or anything, but just it is well established, right? And so I'd stick to that kind of well established area, except, and then stretch that where it really matters to gain, advantage or value.
Yeah, I personally would still consider Node bleeding edge, because
right.
But I'm always finding new ways to use it. 6 years ago, I was primarily building back-end APIs of it, and that was that. And then 4 years ago, I was building Electron, and now I'm doing VS Code. And then more recently did IoT,
Yep.
actually writing a Node app that runs on an IoT device, which is, Node it's something that you mentioned is about how much Node is used. Node really is everywhere. It's on every device. It's incredible how much it's grown, and I personally am so happy to see it. So
yeah, and I think even people who don't realize that, because it's integrated into a lot of development workflows, even if your output is something else in the end. So like a fully static website doesn't necessarily use Node in the deployment, but Node is a key part of the tooling, which actually gets you there to be able to have what you deploy in the end too.
Wow, that's the nail on the coffin. I think that was a great thing to say.
Yeah. But also keep in mind, one thing I like to point out when I talk about Node, and so some people listening have probably heard me say this more than a couple times, is, if you look at the history of Node and why it was created and what it is best known for, it's largely web-related stuff, right? It does a lot more than that. It does infrastructure, it can do pretty much everything, but its specialty is web stuff, right? It's APIs, REST, GraphQL, it's serving up web pages, static or dynamic, right? And if you look at what Node is really specialized at, and you look at what a lot of IBMI folks mean when they say the word modernization, there's a pretty big overlap there, right? And so that's why Node has become such a big deal. And in my view, that's at least one of the reasons why Node has become such a big deal for IBMI.
Oh, for sure. There are so many businesses that would be lacking behind if it wasn't for this, just wasn't for Node alone. Seriously.
Yeah.
Time to production is so fast, and I can appreciate that in the technology.
Yeah.
And one of my funner conference projects was mostly watching Michael do a really cool IoT project a couple of years ago. So Michael, you want to tell us about the cool stuff you 3D printed and what we got together to show off IoT stuff with IBMI?
Yeah, I mean, it's sort of IoT and related stuff is one of my sort of personal hobbies and interests, and Node is just such a great fit for that because, you know, IoT tends to be asynchronous and Node is asynchronous, so it's a very natural fit within Node to say, wait for this event, whether it's a temperature or a, you know, what was it, temperature or humidity, you know, whether it's one of those things coming, it's very natural to say, wait for that to happen, and then I'm going to do something, and so, you know, I built sensors and stuff like that. And so together for one of the labs that we did in some of the different talks that Jesse and I have done together, put together a little sensor, which was, it's an ESP device. If you haven't seen those, it's a very nice, and I use the Wemos Mini D1, basically, you know, inch by inch circuit board. You can power it through USB by plugging it in so really easily. It has a TCP/IP stack built in. And you can wire up, it's got some pins. So, you know, basically wired up some, you know, simple sensors to get that temperature, that humidity. I also do like the 3D printing. It's pretty cool. I just kind of like building things. So any tools that let me build things are neat. So 3D printed a case to put into that and actually put in the IBMI logo because, you know, that's always fun. And then, you know, that very, you know, putting a little bit of code into that small device, we could then push out that temperature and that humidity over MQTT. And Jesse set up an MQTT server. I think it's what is it? The server? It's
ActiveMQ.
ActiveMQ on IBMI to collect those temperatures and pressures. And we developed a nice lab where you could see these temperatures and humidity flowing in real time. And, you know, I think that matches a lot of sort of industrial situations where like you have some data and you want to collect that data and flow it in. So flowing into your ActiveMQ, from there you can query it to find like current state, or you can do graphs and, you know, just put together some nice queries to show like, oh, here I can get the temperatures over the last hour, 2 hours, that kind of stuff. And we had a lot of fun where, you know, when we did it together in person, that was great. When we did it remote, I'd be like putting my hand over the sensor so that it would change the readings that we're going through.
Yeah, that was so fun. That was, well, and you still have those sensors, I think, sitting on your desk or in your closet at home. And every now and then I ping you on Slack and say, hey, can we demo this? And you know, blow the dust off of them, and it just still continues to flow data in right into DB2, no problem. It's amazing how well they work. It's so cool.
That's what I love about that sort of MQTT and setup is like, you know, and the integration with MQ and all that is like, it seems to be so reliable and just works. It's like, you're right. After a year, I plug the device back in, it reconnects, and the temperature's flowing. So it's something I can easily see people doing. You know, if you're doing a big factory, maybe you want to buy some industrial things. But if you want to experiment, it's an easy way to sort of build some things on a smaller scale and collect some great data.
Yeah, exactly. So Michael, you are, again, we mentioned you're on the technical steering committee. You were chair of the technical steering committee for a number of years. You're definitely in the know with a lot of Node.js stuff, so to speak.
Yep.
In your last few minutes, you mind sharing with our listeners just what you see coming down the pipe? Like what exciting stuff is ahead for Node.js folk?
Sure. So, you know, and actually I'll give the bigger picture, and if you want to go read more about this, the project's very decentralized, so we don't have a roadmap. You can't go necessarily say, here's a roadmap that, you know, a company, even with the level of contribution that we put in, it's not like we basically decide what goes in the project. There's a good number of contributors, and it's sort of a consensus basis. But we do have something where we've called the Next 10 effort, where we're going through and saying like, okay, Node has been really successful, but what do we need to do to be successful in the next 10 years? So some of the technical priorities, we've identified that, and we did this through sort of a process you can read about more if you're interested in, you know, GitHub/Node.js/Next10. But we looked at our constituencies, documented those. We looked at the needs of the constituencies, documented those, and then started to think about the technical priorities. So I'll just touch on a few of those, because that's where like some of the new and interesting stuff will be coming. Modern HTTP, as Jesse mentioned, the sort of web HTTP area has always been something really important and part of the success of Node. But there are new developments, things like fetch in the browser. So, you know, we've agreed that we want to sort of move towards having 2 HTTP APIs versus the current one. One very high level, fetch based, so that it's consistent with what's in the browser. But then a more full-featured one that, you know, if you need specific performance or you have, you know, more complex use cases that you would use. And so there's work going on that front. There is an experimental version of Fetch in Node now, which is great. And so work will continue on that. And there's work in the Node.js/Ndici repo, which is sort of a new HTTP interface, you know, and which may quite likely become sort of the future basis of that second API I talked about. ESM, so the ES modules, Node always had its common JS module ecosystem, but the web, for better or worse, the browser is standardized on something else. So Node now does have an ESM implementation. Still some parts around observability and problem determination that we need to continue to work on. So there's a bunch of work going on that. Specifically, things like loaders are being worked on. If you've ever done instrumentation with Node, you would do that through monkey patching, which is like changing the actual code. You can't do that with ESM, so loaders allow you to get in there a little bit more in the Java JVMTI type model to modify the code beforehand. So lots of good work going on that front. There's good discussions around types and supporting people who like to use types. I still find there's some people who are like, hey, I never want to use types or TypeScript. There's another group who are like, yeah, I can't see how you can develop it without it. But there is consensus that, you know, there's enough people that it's important. And so there's some good discussions going around in terms of like, how can we what can we do to help the types be generated more efficiently? As well as even some discussions around like, how do we make it easier to run TypeScript? So for example, what's just been discussed is if you did Node script.ts and you haven't done any config, it would pop up and say, hey, it looks like you're trying to run TypeScript. Here's, you know, a page you can go to find out how to configure that. And then after you do that configuration and you run, it would actually just run, you know, your TypeScript for you. So I think we'll see some things on that front. Also some interesting work on single executable applications. Some people like to bundle an application, you know, some scripts running on top of Node, but have it shipped as a single binary. And some really good discussions on that front in terms of like, how do we enable people to do that? It's been possible, but they've sort of been disconnected projects or efforts. And we want to make sure that, you know, not necessarily provide all the pieces in Node itself, but provide the pieces that have to be in Node for it to be effective. So I think, you know, we'll see progress on that front. Just trying to think of my other most favorite ones. WebAssembly is actually quite an interesting area, you know, and Node offers the ability to run WebAssembly through V8. There is a WASM implementation, and I've seen some blog posts that say like, hey, if you want to run WASM, just use Node. It's good enough. It's already there. We know it runs across the platform. So I'd love to see Node being used more and more as, you know, the WebAssembly platform for people who need to be able to run that. So that's a few things.
Nice.
Probably at times. So I'll cut it off at there. There's lots of exciting things going on, but
yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Well, and I'll give my endorsement for my favorite, which is a very almost utilitarian feature, which is the new Fetch API, which is really based on Undici, which is the Fetch API that I've used since its early releases back in 2020. It's it's fast, it's easy to use, and it's one of many options, but definitely my favorite way to just go do fetches from Node.js, which is of course important if you need to call APIs, you're building microservices, all kinds of stuff like that. So if the creators of Undici happen to be listening, thank you for all that you do, and of course, Michael, thanks for everything that you do in the greater teams at Red Hat and IBM. And thanks for joining us today. It's been a pleasure having you. So thank you much.
Great. No, thanks for having me.
And
thanks, Michael. You're a legend. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Absolute legend. All right.
Talk to y'all soon.
Next speaker. Thank you. Thank you. Next speaker up is already on the podium as speaker in the space. So I'll let him introduce himself as well. This is Eric Barsness from IBM. So Eric, grab the mic and let our listeners know what you do at IBM.
All right. I'm the team leader of the team in Power Technology Services.
So it sounded like you had a voice effect on.
All right.
Eric, hold on.
All right.
Eric, hold on. Eric, do you have a
Eric, you have a voice effect on your mic, which is actually pretty easy to do accidentally. But if you just want to turn that off if you can, or rejoin, we'll get you back on the spot. Oof.
It's quite funny. All right, Eric. So there is a button on where there is a mute your mic button, and next to it is like a little wand icon. You click on it. And you press voice, and then I think there's a way to turn it off. Oh my god!
How's it now?
Oh, perfect.
That's much better. Rocking and rolling.
Yeah, I can't wait to listen to the pre. I couldn't hear myself being funny, so I'll have to hear it later.
You don't worry. We'll edit it out. I may or may not have lied.
All right. Well, sorry about that. I've
worries.
cumulatively spent more time on Twitter today than my entire life, so I'm certainly no expert in this area. But yeah, my name is Eric Barsness. I'm the team leader of the IBM performance team in IBM Power Technology Services. We used to be called IBM Lab Services. As of a couple of weeks ago, we've changed our name. So think of Lab Services. We're now Technology Services.
Awesome. And one of the reasons we asked for you to be on today, Eric, is just to talk about performance stuff, and in particular, performance related to open source things, right? We've been getting more and more questions lately about, how do I debug open source stuff? How, is it this mysterious black box that I'm running on my platform? Gee, I'm running Node, I'm running Python. What do I do about it? And so, do you want to say a few words about, what tools might be there already to help people understand what's going on with their performance and, other types of analysis of their open source workloads?
Yeah, absolutely. So some things are different, but a lot of things are the same. So, like differences are if you're used to being, coding native IO, you're maybe thinking in a single threaded type environment, you're accessing the database within your job. You go to open source, a lot of times you're multi-threaded, you're accessing the database in a separate job. But a lot of the performance tools work just the same. For the most part, IBM doesn't really care what you're running. It's going to collect data about everything that you're running, and the existing tools will help you analyze that data. So some of those existing tools are collection services, which is running constantly on your machine. Every 5 minutes or 15 minutes, it'll collect information about, a lot of it's about resource usage, so you can see whether or not your application, your open source application is CPU constrained, or you can see that if it's IO constrained using that. Then to go deeper, there's the Job Watcher collection, which is also built into the operating system, and you can visualize it with either the Performance Data Investigator web browser-based interface or the iDoctor Windows-based tool. And with that, you can start to get things like call stack information, so you can see, and including open source, we see the pace environment if it's running in there. We can see the call stack entries there. We can see if you get stuck waiting on something. We can see what kind of object you're waiting on. We can see who's holding that object. So if you're doing database activity, we can see the the exact record number that you're reading in whatever file you're reading, and we can see who's holding that, and we can see what they're doing, and we can see the SQL statement. So there's a ton of that kind of information we can get with those existing tools to understand what's going on inside an open source environment.
Well, and that's a great point with the database stuff, especially because in my experience, a very large percentage of the time, quite literally, probably over 90% of the time, when somebody says, oh, hey, I'm running this Node.js program or this Python program, and I'm having some kind of performance issue, usually the underlying performance thing is that you're just in a database call somewhere, right?
Yep.
And you have queries that need to be optimized, or you have a lock that's being held, or you have something like that that really is, debugged just like you would any of the other classic workloads that are running on the platform, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's been true even before open source. We get calls where clients having their SAP performance problem. Well, it's not the SAP environment, it's their database access. And the same for open source. WebSphere, that was, most people don't think of that as open source anymore, but it's Java based. And, that was a different environment for people. But a lot of the problems there were also database related. And that can be a number of things. That can be, as you mentioned, your SQL isn't tuned properly. So there's the SQL plan cache on IBM I is collecting information about all the SQL that's running on the partition. So you can still use that whether you're using open source or not to see what's going on in your SQL statement. You can see if indexes are being recommended, that kind of information. Another thing that can happen a lot is that if you're not using connection pooling properly is a big problem. So so you want to make sure you're using that. So you have a pool of connections, you put reasonable limits on that pool as far as a minimum and a maximum. There's age timeouts and lifetime settings and things like that. But basically, one common problem we see, whether it's open source or not, it's when connections are coming into the IBM I or even being connected internally to the IBM I through the local database connections or the QZJS init job connections, is when, say, there's some kind of a hiccup on the IBM I, well, then if these pools aren't configured properly, then all of a sudden everybody just decides to create more and more connections because they're a little bit slow. Well, that just snowballs things and make things worse. So there's kind of two problems then. There's you're not using connection pooling, that's a problem, or you're using it, but you have really high maximums and not reasonable settings, and that's another problem.
Right. Yeah, and I think you're spot on. A lot of times the first analysis when it comes to doing some kind of performance interrogation is like, again, looking whether it's memory bound or CPU bound or something like that. And your first steps remain the same whether you're running open source or not, which is something a lot of people don't quite grasp at first until they're given the pointers and they get there. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just the performance tools that work with open source and still give you that insight. All of the work management type things on IBM I still work with open source technology. You can still, create the subsystems. You can route work to subsystems based on IP addresses or user IDs. You can set up workload groups, workload capping groups, which you can limit how much CPU a subsystem uses or a job uses or a product uses. Memory pools, all that kind of stuff still works with open source.
Right, and that's a key point as well. I mean, some people are just maybe getting started with workload capping groups, or maybe they've been using them for a while. But if I have a working workload capping group defined, and I am also running a whole bunch of Python stuff or PHP stuff, pick your technology, how do I leverage that? What's my glue there to get my Python stuff regulated by this other workload management capability that the platform has?
Right. So it's the workload group. So you can limit that on a subsystem is what most people will do, and you can do multiple subsystems. You have to so you set up a workload group, you configure it for a subsystem, and you say I only want all the jobs in that subsystem to be only use 1 core's worth of CPU or 2 cores. It has to be whole increments, but you can you get that workload into that subsystem using your normal work management technologies or configuration, and then you set up the workload group, and it's as simple as saying this subsystem, this many cores.
Right. So the takeaway is it really is as simple as sending my open source code to the right subsystem and letting the existing facilities do the rest, right?
Right. And then if you're doing database access and that's running in a different job, then you have to decide whether or not you want that grouped into that same subsystem with those other jobs, or you want that in a different subsystem, and then you could cap that workload separately if you wanted to do it that way. So you have a lot of flexibility.
Right. And I'll take a moment as well just to kind of do some self-advertisement of a tool I created called Service Commander. Service Commander lets you very easily in the configuration for a service as you defined, route it to the right subsystem. And one of the reasons that's in there is exactly for this reason. So you can just with a simple configuration command always send your Node.js API gateway or your WordPress deployment or whatever it is to an appropriate subsystem. So a bit of a plug for this tool called Service Commander. If you just Google Service Commander for IBMI, you should be able to find it.
Yeah, my next question was about what actual tools are available other than manually doing it in 5250. What actual tools other than Service Commander actually make it easy for us to manage where jobs get routed? Or is it really you have to go in 5250 and manage it from there most of the time?
So I believe most of the interfaces are in Navigator for I now, so you can do that work through Navigator. Otherwise, yeah, just use Service Commander tool is really nice.
Cool. Well,
yeah.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, and another takeaway, I think, vast majority of the people listening today are probably familiar with collection services and some of the stuff available there. But again, we have quite a few listeners. Can you just give us a 30-second overview of what collection services is and why it's kind of special?
Yeah, so collection services gives you it's the starting point for understanding what's going on in your partition or on your job or your threads. So it collects information about every job thread running on the partition. It also collects information about Ethernet lines, disk drives, disk arms, that kind of stuff. So you really, it's a good place to see the resource usage information. So, again, is my partition or my job CPU constrained or IO constrained? Are my disk drives fast enough? That kind of thing. It also has, as part of it, which also overlaps with Job Watcher, has this weight bucket technology, which is unique to IBMI. No other platform has it. It's pretty amazing. And that gives you the ability to tell not just when you're active what you're doing, but when you're not active, why are you not active? Because quite often that's more of a problem than you're using too much CPU. Because we generally like to assume that if you're using CPU, you're hopefully doing something productive. But if you're not in the CPU, why aren't you? And with the weight buckets, we can see that. With collection services, we get the grouping of it, so we can tell, oh, you spent this much percent of your time in the CPU, this much waiting for IO, whether doing a disk write or a disk read, or this much time locking in some form or fashion. So that's extremely powerful information. And then when you pair that with the Job Watcher, weight buckets with the call stacks and the weight objects and the waiters and holders, you get a whole nother level of depth of really understanding what's going on when you're bottlenecked for some reason. What's that bottleneck and what can you do about it?
Well, and I love that you mentioned that, some of the stuff we have is really unique to the platform, because this idea that we have this facility or set of facilities that are always running and always collecting these performance metrics and always providing, even retroactively without some kind of, preemptive setup, retroactively providing all of these insights about the performance of your system is really unique to the platform. And one of the reasons, honestly, that the platform is maybe one of the better places to run even open source workloads, because we have this set up, right? I've talked to people who do this type of stuff with other platforms, and let me tell you, it can be incredibly complex to set up some kind of monitoring system that's still not as powerful as what we just already have baked in out of the box with IBMI. And I don't think we talk about that enough.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Especially that, the collection service is running all the time. Job Watcher is built into the operating system, but is not running all the time. But I recommend clients run it all the time. There are green screen commands to run it, or you can use the QMG tools to initiate it. Or if you purchase the iDoctor tool, you can set it up, and you can run these monitors that just automatically collect, like collection services, a certain number of hours worth of data instead of days like collection services, and have that data available in case you have a problem, whether you're going to analyze it or whether you're going to send that data into IBM in a case to analyze it. Because there's nothing worse than not having the right data after you had a problem, and you have to reproduce the problem in order to have it again to really understand what happened.
Right, exactly.
One of the nicer things that I like about having all these performance metrics is actually being able to, well, I mean, it's all eventually you can get it from the database. So, there's all these new procedures and user-defined functions that let us query system performance via SQL, which means that we can easily pipe most of that data into, systems where we can easily measure performance over time. Grafana being one of them. Actually, that's probably one of the more popular ones. I know that Jesse has a lot to say about that. But, that's really another nice addition is that, the system can collect all of this information, but it's also very easy for us to get the information off the system as well. It's one of the real highlights that I like about it.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there's, because all the collection services, all the fields are documented. So if you want to write your own queries against the data, you go right ahead and do that. You don't have to buy any tool, IBM tool or third-party tool or anything like that. You theoretically could query all that data yourself. And then the IBM I services are definitely making it easier to get at some of that data. I don't think there's many that go against the collection services data. There's a service that gets you information about the collection services collector configuration information, so you can see whether you've got it configured optimally or not. And then there's other services that give you information about like CPU utilization at an interval basis that you can query, repeatedly if you want to. You can do a run, query before and after a run, and get some information that way.
Right. Yeah, and the other important thing with open source, if you're using PHP or Node or pick your language, these individual languages also have their own suites of tools for digging into profiling data or runtime debug or various other things that you can get insight as well into what your application is doing, right? And so what I always like to say is that you actually have a whole layered set of tools that you can use that's again unique to IBMI. Because if I'm running if I'm running Node.js on IBMI, I can do some level of debug with Clinic.js or other Node.js specific tools. I can get flame graphs with 0x or whatever my tools of choice are, and there's lots of them out there. Or quite often, and I also have the ability to look at collection services data, job watcher data, and I just have a lot of capabilities at my fingertips. That's again even more than what I would have on other platforms.
Yeah, and I would recommend people start with the native tooling just to scope the problem. Start with that collection services data because it's out there. Get a feel whether you're CPU constrained or IO constrained, because that'll lead you to different tooling, whether that's external open source unique tooling or another tool that's native on IBMI we haven't talked about, but I'll just briefly mention it, is the Performance Explorer tooling, which is a way that you can configure different collection trace types, and you can, for example, you can see every single logical database IO you're doing on the partition. I can see the job doing it, the program being the program accessing whatever file, what record number it's going after, all that kind of gory details. And there's a wide variety of types of PEX traces you can run to get really detailed application level information and get down to even the statement number in your program, so you can really find the hotspot very well with some of these tools.
Right. And Eric, you and I co-presented along with George Weaver from IBM. We co-presented at this session for the large user group here in Rochester, the LUG as we call it. And one of the attendees had a really great question / complaint, which is, all these paste things that I'm running, all this open source stuff, Python, Node.js, PHP, whatever, it all ends up in this one job name. It's this QP0Z SPWP, right? And it was kind of this grievance, and it's actually something I'm glad he brought up, because it's a common complaint that I see where you can look in collection services and the first level of investigation breaks things down by job name, and so you have this QP0Z SPWP job that's just encapsulating all of your everything pace, right? Could be GCC compiler or something, could be some SAP component, could be your Node.js code, could be PHP, could be Python, could be Ruby, right? It's all just in this one QP0Z SPWP job name, right? And so there's this almost a hidden gem in the operating system that I just want to make sure that we mention today before.
Oh, Jesse? Did you?
It muted me. I promise I didn't do that. So don't know where I cut off, but there is this super secret hidden egg or Easter egg, if you will, in the operating system that lets you name your paste jobs, and that lets you split out your various workloads into doing even easier analysis with those tools, right? It's just this environment variable called paste fork job name. You can Google that. You'll be able to find it quickly enough. Another plug for Service Commander, that tool will actually default to something reasonable. So if you create a service called My API, the default job name for everything you run under it will be My API, right? So just wanted to dispel that myth as well in the time that we have here today, because a lot of people think that all this open source stuff, it runs in one big clump and it's really hard to tear apart and debug, and it's not.
And doesn't Service Commander allow you? Doesn't Service Commander make it easy to name the job when you use that? When you actually run a service there?
Yep. It has a reasonable default, but you can also say I want this job name to be X, and it will automatically always run that job as X.
Wow.
So yeah.
Look at that.
Yep.
That's nice on its own.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's a very, very handy feature, because other things we've told people to do is, use different subsystems, use different user IDs. If you're connecting, don't have 20 different applications all using the same user ID to connect to the IBMI. So there's other ways, but that trick that you've got, Jesse, is a really nice one for making the job names more unique.
Right. Yeah. And the other thing I want to mention as well is, and this is new as of a few years ago, which is the subsystem routing for the database connections, right? So if you're using ODBC to connect in from something, there is that, Eric, what's that stuff called technically to be able to route different users to different subsystems for the database connection jobs?
I just know it as routing to the subsystems, and it's based on IP address or user ID. And new one, I think it's new in 7.5 is the ability to do that for secure connections. So that was kind of a hole we had for a while.
Right. Yep, absolutely. And that was a big deal enhancement. So awesome. So Eric, anything else you want to say on this topic today?
Nope, it's been a good discussion. Sorry about the reverb problem there at the beginning, but I'm glad we got that straightened out so I could share some insight with folks.
No problem, Eric. Thank you so much for being here. It's been an absolute pleasure having you, and thank you for the discussion. This is good stuff.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Eric. All right, next up we have Liam, I'll let you introduce this guy.
Yeah, all right. Well, all right. So we have Brandon Pedersen, also an IBMer for the longest time. He's actually going to talk to us today about business value. So we've had a lot of technical topics now, but I think an important topic is to kind of reaffirm that IBMI isn't actually doing as bad as what most people think it's doing. So I like to have Brandon for this because he's he gets to see that stuff. He actually gets to overlook a lot of that stuff. So Brandon, hi, thanks for coming on. And
hey,
sorry to poke you on Slack.
No problem.
Why don't you introduce yourself?
No problem. So hey everyone, glad to be here again. Liam, thank you for setting this up for another year. So as Liam said, my name is Brandon Pedersen. I am the product marketing manager for IBMI and our IBMI portfolio, as well as our portfolio of Power Hardware. And so basically what I do is manage all marketing activities end to end for IBMI and for Power. I interact with a lot of different people across the marketing matrix here at IBM, and I work closely with Liam and Jesse and the development team, and also our product management team, Allison, Dan, Linda, to manage the day-to-day business of IBMI. So.
Cool. Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it. So my first question to you is, what do you how many how often do you get to interact with clients, and how do you see IBMI growing in their business?
Yeah, absolutely. I do a good amount, and not as much as I'd like to. I always enjoy it. I was so glad this year to get back in person. You know, I was out there in Common at Common, and hope to do more traveling this year and next year. But so glad to be back in person. Actually, talk to our amazing clients, partners, ISVs, and there's just so much excitement around the business, around the portfolio. You know, this year we announced IBMI 7.5. We recently announced and GA'd the rest of the Power 10 portfolio. So Power 10 Scale Out is now in market. So go buy your Power 10. And back in May, we also announced and GA'd a product called Merlin, or IBMI Modernization Engine for Lifecycle Integration, if you want to get technical. But there's so much excitement around the latest release around Power 10 and around Merlin. And clients are just excited. You know, they're also excited to get back in person, see each other face to face for the first time in a long time. And there's just a lot of excitement and buzz, and I couldn't be happier to be part of the business at this point in time. The way IBMI is growing in their business, and by the way, we've had a second consecutive quarter in Q2 year-to-year growth for IBMI. So we're growing, year after year, quarter after quarter, and the business is very strong, very healthy. That's not just my opinion; that's just fact. That's just data, right? So. Our business is very strong, and like I said, with the announcement of Power 10 Scale Out, the family of hardware that most of our install base trust their business on, we expect to grow even further here in Q3 and Q4 and into next year. But clients are utilizing IBMI in all different kinds of ways. I mean, it's not just their main core business applications have been on the platform since the start of time, and they continue to trust the platform to run those applications. But now you look at what our clients doing around new technologies, and this is something I say every year. I think I said this on our Twitter space last year. But more and more of our clients are adopting new technologies alongside their business critical applications on IBMI. They're adopting AI, they're adopting IoT or Internet of Things applications, and really bringing new value to their business critical applications that have been running for a very long time. And so, I definitely encourage everybody to go to our client story website. Hopefully you've been there before. If not, go check it out. Just Google IBMI client stories, bookmark that page. I've written every story on there, so hopefully you like them, and bring me your stories as well. But there you can read all different kinds of innovative solutions that our clients are coming up with, and that our amazing partner community are helping our clients develop on the platform. So it's not just your traditional ERP, financial, CRM kind of applications. It is those, but now they're utilizing these new technologies and building business value into those existing workloads to help grow their business and reach new customers and revenue. So we see that a lot, and with the introduction of Merlin, we expect that to pick up the remainder of this year and into next year. And clients are modernizing the way they, not only modernizing their applications with new functionality, like I just mentioned, new user interfaces, utilizing open source in the back end and the front end, but also modernizing the way that they build new applications, the way they take their applications to market. Merlin is really going to revolutionize the way our clients do CI/CD on the platform. For a lot of our clients, they're not really familiar with CI/CD or DevOps, and I expect that to change with the introduction of Merlin. And so, I keep mentioning our amazing partner community. They're helping our clients, really modernize the way they do development and helping them implement, more agile DevOps CI/CD type of dev environment. So, with Merlin, I'm really excited to see that pick up the remainder this year and into next year, and really open the eyes of a lot of our clients what's possible on the platform, and the fact that you can do modern development, modern CI/CD on IBMI. So really excited to see that solution pick up. And I know you're working on that, Liam, and welcome to the team. Hopefully IBM hasn't scared you off yet. But
No, they haven't. They try.
All right, good.
Jesse talks to me every day, so I'm
leaving.
Nice.
Every day. Doesn't
every day.
I wish I could get to. I need to get back to Rochester. I've been there since before the pandemic, so I need to get back up there.
That would be fun. We'd have a good time. So
For
I have
sure.
a question for you regarding Power 10. So you said Power 10 scale out was available, right?
Yep.
So do you see that Power 10 right now is applicable to IBM customers, or do you think that there should be a waiting period before they upgrade, or do you think that they'd probably get benefits out of upgrading right away?
Yeah, no, it's definitely beneficial to get on Power 10 right away. They're going to see immediate value of the new hardware, the new architecture, the new processor, and you can do. The key thing, from every new generation of Power is the ability to do more with less. So now with Power 10, you can do even more with less hardware. And so what you're doing on Power 9, you can now do that with an even smaller footprint on Power 10. And so you're going to get immediate benefits of performance. Actually, we have with our lab testing, the 1014, I know if there's clients and users on here, a lot of you are probably running an 814 or a 914. With the 1014, we actually were able to get an 85% improvement in performance for an IBMI workload from Power 9 to Power 10. 85%.
Wow.
That's unheard of. So they're going to get immediate, exactly. It's super exciting. They're going to get immediate performance benefit getting on Power 10. Like I said, being able to do more with less. And, the continued RAS, reliability, availability, serviceability capabilities that we have on Power 10, on the S10, 22, and 24, we have something called active memory mirroring, which is just another capability of RAS and to help your business critical applications stay up and running and online. And so they're going to get immediate benefit around availability, reliability. And so, yeah, definitely, if you haven't already, go check out Power 10. All of our collaterals out there online. You can go on the new product pages and actually take a 3D tour of every server. You can take the lid off, take the processor out of the server, look around all sides of the server. So definitely go check those out if you haven't already. But yeah, definitely. And I know there's a lot of excitement around Power 10 scale out in the IBMI community. I had several partners come up to me at Power Up and say that, as soon as we GA, their client is going to place an order. I had one partner tell me that their client went and got budget approval for Power 9 with their manager, and then as Power 10 is available, they're just going to erase Power 9, put Power 10 in order right away. So, not sure if I was supposed to repeat that, but but there's so much excitement, and so yeah, I know we haven't been in person in a while, like I said, but I don't remember there being this much excitement last time we released a generation of hardware. So yeah, definitely go check out Scale Out, and you're going to see immediate benefit for your IBMI workloads on the platform.
Sick. Cool. So last year we also had a discussion about cloud, and so I'm really curious about cloud because I feel like, especially in the IBMI space during COVID, cloud kind of not exploded, but it definitely took more. It definitely had more interest because people weren't going into the office, and a lot of businesses run their power hardware in their office. I've seen it. I'm sure Jesse's seen it too. So I'm curious if you could tell us anything about, or if IBMI has gotten more popular in IBM Cloud, because I know that you can run IBMI in the IBM Cloud now. So I'm wondering if
absolutely
the client base is actually making use of that, or how do you see that?
Yeah, definitely. Like most of our IBM Power clients, not just AIX and Linux, they're looking at cloud as another tool, another business solution. So, we don't see clients, putting everything in the cloud, going all public, and particularly our bigger clients, we don't see them saying, "Oh, everything will always stay on-prem in my data center; it's never going anywhere." Neither of those are true. So it's this concept of hybrid cloud, and I think I said this last year as well. Our IBMI clients are looking at cloud, are utilizing cloud, but it's for particular use cases, for particular workloads. Maybe now with cloud, you mentioned IBMI is in the IBM Cloud with an offering we have called Power Virtual Server. So we have Linux, IBMI, and AIX on Power 9. Power 10 is in roadmap in IBM Cloud, so you can go out there and spin up an environment just like you have on-prem sitting there in the office. And you can spin up an environment within seconds on IBM Cloud with an IBMI partition and create a dev test environment, do some dev and test. And when you're done, just take it down and you're done. A lot of our clients are utilizing cloud for backup and disaster recovery. So rather than having now to buy additional hardware, and we love when they buy additional hardware, don't get me wrong, but rather than having to buy a bunch of additional hardware or hire additional people, whatever, to create a DR backup type environment, you can just do DR to the cloud now. And so if you have an incident with your production environment, you can just do failover to a cloud environment. And not just IBM cloud environment. Again, we'd love for you to please come to our cloud, but it can be, we have a huge ecosystem of MSPs and CSPs that'll help you implement cloud in whatever way you're looking at. So yeah, failover, disaster recovery, dev test. We see a lot of like expansion to the cloud, so increasing flexibility. So let's say your on-prem environment is getting overworked, you can boost up to the cloud to get that quick additional capacity that you need to handle a spike in traffic or a spike in workloads. Think about, I mentioned our client story page. We have a client story out there I wrote around a logistics company in Europe, and at the beginning of the pandemic, everyone's at home, everybody's ordering their stuff at home. Was a logistics provider, their traffic, their spike in workloads went through the roof, right? And so rather than having to go out and buy a bunch of additional hardware, and obviously, like you said, Liam, they don't want to go in the data center and set it up with the pandemic going on. They can just boost to the IBM cloud. That's what they did. They used Power Virtual Server, boost up to the IBM cloud to get that additional capacity that they needed to handle that all of a sudden spike in traffic and in workload demand. So that's another use case. Business demands are so volatile now. It just takes a world event or something happening, and all of a sudden your business, you need additional compute capacity, right? And so now with cloud, you can just partition an environment, get whatever you need, and then when you're done, take it down. You don't have to go buy a complete new server and hire a consultant or somebody to come in and set that up. So with cloud, you have that capability now in your hands. So that's just a few of the use cases we see our clients utilizing cloud for, and we'll see increased adoption over time. But yeah, it won't ever be all public cloud or all on-prem. It's always, hey, cloud is a tool that you can use as a business solution to get stuff done. So that's the way we look at it, and that's where our clients are looking at it.
No, for sure. Yeah, that makes sense to me. So, being on the Maryland team now, I can actually see where cloud, especially in using like a cloud workspace, that's part of Maryland, is that developers will be able to develop, in the cloud or in the browser at least. So whether it's on-prem, or running in the cloud, that's something that I'm expecting to become more popular in the coming year, I suppose, because in theory, Maryland can run anywhere that OpenShift runs, right? And so, yeah, you can run OpenShift on-prem, and you can have Maryland running there, and you can have your developers using Maryland on-prem. But at the same time, you can easily run OpenShift in the cloud. And so, not a lot of people will want to run it on-prem. Sometimes it's just easier to spin up OpenShift in IBM Cloud and install Maryland there, and then have some kind of virtual network to reach out, and then you'd have a combination of a hybrid cloud, so you can develop, really develop in the cloud and deploy onto your IBM on-prem. Like that's going to be, I think that's a totally common thing that will be becoming more popular in the next year or so. And I'm actually
absolutely.
looking forward to that, and I am, because I'm probably the one writing the documentation for it. So
you're going to be busy.
Yeah, I know. So, I know that the build up to 7.5, I know that you were busy with that, doing a lot of that. And so, how much of what your work has been up to 7.5, how much of it was related to Maryland,
Yeah, quite a lot. I mean, because Maryland was a net new, what we call in the IBM business LPP, licensed program product. So probably many of you are familiar with that term, but it was the first net new LPP we've had, and I don't remember since my career here at IBM. So,
right.
when you introduce a new product to market, and we partnered with ARCAD. ARCAD is a key part of the solution. So, I was on a weekly call with their team, and I know the development team. I'm sure Jesse and Liam was on many other calls But yeah, so it was a new experience for me, actually, personally, working with a business partner to take a solution to market jointly. And it was a lot of fun. The Arcat team is great. And, shout out to them and their leadership and their marketing team. They did a lot for Merlin as well. But yeah, it was a new experience. I think it was the first, because my entire career here at IBM, even before Power, I was with middleware, WebSphere, and the middleware business is very similar to our systems business, and they're both a long time business, both cash cows, and it's more of releasing. You have the next generation, and you market to the install base, and they know what's coming. Same with Power. I mean, Power 8, Power 9, Power 10. And so, Merlin was kind of the first experience I had with actually taking something net new, brand new, built on existing technology, right? Built on IBM, but something brand new and something exciting like, the world of containers and modern development, CI/CD, DevOps, taking something brand new and taking it to market, and taking it to a market that maybe this is a very early type of adoption of a product. Like I mentioned earlier, a lot of our clients, they're just getting into CI/CD. They're just adopting DevOps or Git for change management, whatever it is. And so it's an exciting new space. And so that was really exciting to be able to introduce that to the IBM community. So yeah, it was a new journey for me, taking something brand new to market and working jointly with a business partner. And so, yeah, there was a lot of work leading up to it, for sure, around, how do we message this? How do we position this? Even, first of all, what do we call it? I was involved with the naming way back.
I think you might be the only person I know that can say the full name without a hiccup.
Yeah, IBM Modernization Engine for Lifecycle Integration, and I can type it very quickly too.
That's the type where you stand at the mirror and say it over and over again until you have it perfected.
But you have to put the emphasis on the R and for, right? For
Lifecycle Integration.
For
exactly. I roll the R. Yeah, exactly. And, yeah, so I was involved with the naming, and that was the first time I ever involved with naming a product, because we don't ever change the name of, we haven't changed the name of Power in a long time, I'll say that. So that's being involved with new naming of a product, and yeah, it was just a new experience, so it was really exciting, and it helped me develop professionally. So and yeah, it was exciting. So shout out to Arcat and everybody on the IBM team that was involved with that successful rollout, and really looking forward to seeing the adoption this year.
Cool. Well, we're kind of getting close to the finish now. So, Brandon, maybe you have a final few words that you want to drop in before I tell Tim to get his ass in here.
Sure, for sure. So, yeah, thank you again for having me. Yeah, like I said, 7.5 announced GA in May. Merlin announced GA in May, and the rest of the Power 10 family is announced in GA. It's all there. Go get your Power 10 server today. Upgrade to 7.5 if you haven't already. And it's been probably the busiest time as an IBMer I've ever had in my career. So I'm also getting my master's degree. So it's been extremely busy 2022. But it's been extremely exciting as well. So there's been so much buzz and excitement around 7.5 Merlin Power 10, and we have more coming this year. That's all I will say for now. So stay tuned. We always have something up the sleeve. So just an exciting time. I'd like to thank everybody who joined here today, and thank you for being part of the IBM community and making our business so strong and successful. And thank you, Liam and Jesse and the IBM team, for everything you do as well in your evangelism for IBM. So we couldn't have done it without you. So,
all right, thanks, mate. Appreciate you coming
on.
Yeah,
thank you. All right, have a great rest of the day, and I will be seeing you shortly, Liam.
Oh yeah, you will. You will
for sure.
All right,
for
see
sure.
you, buddy.
All right, man. All right.
All right, so Jesse, I thought I'd ask you a question since we've been going at it for about 3 hours now.
Mm-hmm. What's on your mind?
Is it done yet?
Almost. We have one more legend lined up.
I know. I've just told him to come, but we might be waiting a minute. I'm looking to see if he's coming in here. It's been good. It's been pretty good, I would say.
Yeah, and it really is. What Brandon said is spot on. It's a really great time to be working on the platform right now. I mean, there's just so much new stuff that's happening all the time. You know, especially, you know, I get to see people doing IoT stuff, people doing quantum stuff, people doing all kinds of new stuff, streaming to Kafka. You mentioned Grafana, and there's just all kinds of new technologies that people are deploying with or on IBMI all the time. And I feel like I say this just about every year, well, at least the last few years, but but it's the most exciting time in recent history to be on IBMI, right? And if things go well, I'll say the same thing next year, where it's like it just gets more and more exciting every year with the new stuff that's happening. The new stuff I see clients doing is just amazing.
Yeah, one of the absolute favorite things I've gotten from today is we've spoken about such a wide range of technologies, from performance collection and, you know, Camel, but it really has kind of resonated with me about how I can make use of all of these technologies in, you know, in a business. Like, I can take that performance data, smack it into Camel. You know, Camel can call another service that's running Node somewhere else. You know, like this,
right?
It all has a place somewhere or other, and I love that about it. You know.
Yeah, exactly. All the integration is just so there, so readily available.
I know, love that. Well, I'm telling Tim, I'm pinging him, but I don't want to text him. I'm not like that, but I'm going to ping him.
Pinging him on Slack. I invited him here on Twitter.
Yeah, it's real good. We had a lot of people for 3 hours. I think we had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 10 will be 9. Wow, that's pretty good. And I think an hour ago, I'm looking at the YouTube stats here on my screen. We had a peak plus Twitter. We had just over 200 people about an hour ago, which is kind of neat. That's pretty good numbers, I'd say, for an IBMI event online too. It's not the worst.
Yeah. So while we're waiting for Tim to get on, you know, Liam, what's your favorite technology to be playing with lately? I mean, you're a big Node fan, right? That's still true. You're still loving that stuff.
Yeah, Node is pretty good. Although I, about 6 months ago, had written a blog post on GraphQL, and I just started using it again last week just to refamiliarize myself with it. And GraphQL actually is still like the most amazing, most fun piece of technology I've ever used. Like, if you have a pretty normalized database, GraphQL is definitely like the thing that I would use all over the place. I can't believe how easy it is to just build one API that serves all of the data that you have. Like, I love that kind of stuff, you know?
Right.
It just blows my mind. But yeah, that's the big thing at the moment. Not really a lot. I mean, I've been diving into VS Code Web. That's the thing that I find very interesting lately too. And of course, I'm having to learn OpenShift. So, I have it running locally. I have an instance of OpenShift running on my desktop PC now, because you need like 60 gig of RAM or something to run it. Like,
oh, right.
Yeah. So my desktop machine at home has 64. So I uninstalled every game that I had and installed Linux and put OpenShift on it. So now that's OpenShift installed for some reason on my computer. I don't know what to do with it. So, and I don't think AT&T would be happy if I was using my gigabit fiber to host something or other. So I'm trying to figure out what to do with that now. But I have OpenShift.
So do you have unlimited fiber?
Yeah, I guess I haven't really tried it. You know, I guess. And nobody's told me I've got a cap, so it just means I would.
Yeah,
so I just stream
Rock
Netflix
on.
all the time, right? So
rock on.
How about you? What's good and exciting? You're not allowed to say Camel though.
Yeah, I've been more involved in like real time monitoring tools for open source stuff, right? So you had mentioned Grafana earlier. Grafana is really great because, you know, Grafana's visualization engine is so flexible, so powerful, and it does that really great job of balancing complexity or power with simplicity, right? Like, a lot of things are either really simple, really easy to use, but they're not really that powerful, or they're really, really powerful, but they're also too complex to use. But Grafana does a really great job of balancing that. So Grafana is really great at visualizing a whole bunch of stuff. But Grafana is not great at like data persistence, right? And so there's this other technology that the industry has been using for a good number of years called Prometheus, which its core component is a time series database.
Right.
And so one of the things that I built recently is an IBMI exporter. So you can export all these IBMI metrics about how many active connections do you have, all kinds of system status and performance metrics. And it's extensible, so you can even add, information about your own, how many sales have I made today? All of this type of stuff. It'll export into Prometheus, and then Prometheus will keep this running time series database. It'll monitor your systems for all the metrics that you want around the clock.
Right.
And then you can build your custom dashboards with Grafana, whether you have one IBMI system or 200 IBMI systems, or you have, 5 IBMIs and 5 Linux systems. You can monitor just about anything
one
now.
Of those technologies that you can really plug anything into it.
Exactly.
It's kind of like Camel. It really is. You can plug any data source into it and make it look nice and pretty, and you're golden.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, it's such cool stuff, and for the people who are already managing a very large IT infrastructure or a diverse IT infrastructure, these kinds of tools are really good because it really just gives you that single pane of glass to go see what's going on with your your Kubernetes cluster, your Windows PC, your IBMI system. It's just really powerful stuff.
Yeah, cool.
But it looks like we do have Tim on deck. So Tim, welcome aboard. Good to have you here today.
It's good to be here.
You bet. So Tim,
as clear as daylight too.
It's clear as day. Thanks for coming on. So for those who don't know, well, I'll let Tim introduce himself, but Tim is a fellow business architect over here, like me. But Tim, I'll let you share more about what you do at IBM, what you've been doing, and what you find exciting, especially around development practices.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jesse. Yeah, so I'm a business architect. Application development and systems management are the two areas that I specifically get to care about. So I get to spend my time talking about doing really modern things, because that's the thing that interests me the most. And I get excited about doing modern development on our platform. And I extend that not just to the application development world, but even some of the systems management world that we're doing. I'm looking to see how can we do that stuff better using technology of today. And that's really kind of my interest level, and how we, if you will, hybrid that together with our existing IBMI world.
Good for you. Well, all right. So, Tim, you actually suggested this title to me, Modern Development Practices. I didn't even. There was not even a discussion. It was like, this is what I'm going to talk about. This is it.
Well, you didn't ask for a discussion. You asked for a title. I sent you something. You said, "Ooh, I like that."
I mean, it was the easy pick. I mean, I like it when I don't have to decide. So, okay. So I'm curious, what does in terms of a developer, right? Let's just think about the developer, not so much the people above them. What does a modern development environment or practice look to you? I'm curious.
Well, certainly, it's stop doing things like 1983. Never mind. I won't even.
No, you're very right. I mean,
but
I'll say it just so I can make the noise. This isn't an AS400, so
Yeah. Unfortunately, some of our customers are still doing things like System 36 or 38. But anyways, so when I think about doing things in a modern way, it's really about, one, it's a couple things. What tools are you using? We still have, how many people do we have still using green screen tooling to do development? There's one small aspect. Part of it is then, how are you developing your code? Are you doing legacy, monolithic, modular? services based? Who knew? I don't even go microservices. That might be a stretch too far. But I mean, that's what I know, Jesse. You talk about doing that kind of stuff all the time, as you should.
Mm-hmm.
I'm on board, right? That's what we want to preach to our IBMI, really specifically our RPG community. You can use tools like Git and Jenkins, REST APIs, and it can all be a natural part of what I like to call modern RPG.
Okay. And that's modern. Okay. So let's talk about Maryland. Obviously, there was kind of a need. Right? I mean, that's obviously where a lot of people, Steve and Brandon obviously came on and were pretty excited about Maryland, especially Steve. Part of the point of IBMI is that everything is integrated, right? And so the offering of Maryland that comes with the CI/CD tools, comes with Maryland CI/CD, Jenkins, the IDE. It's got that. It's a fully integrated environment, which I guess is something we've not been missing as such, but it's never been encapsulated as one until now, you might say.
Correct.
Right?
I mean, we've got customers today that are doing modern development. They're writing modern RPG. They're using modern development environments, whether that's RDI, whether that's Code for I, whether it's something else. They're writing and doing modular-based, code. They're leveraging Git as their source control management tool. They're being able to go out down the street and hire young talent because they can come in and their world that they're used to is right there. It just happens that it's RPG, not some other flavor. And then, right, distribution across their enterprise, right? I mean, the CI/CD build and deployment process. Oh, I mean, it's all possible. We have customers that are using, take your pick, Jenkins, Baboon, Azure. I mean, we settled on, for the purpose of day one with Merlin, we wanted to have a tool that was supported by IBM. And that's a key thing, where you go to IBM, we give you a environment for doing development. It's got a modern IDE, it's got modern source control, it's got Jenkins-based CI/CD deployment, and is it got everything? No, absolutely not. But we're continuing to build and work and add new things to it.
Right. That's kind of one of the nice points about this new product. And Brandon, by the way, he was very excited that this was like the first LPP that he had ever worked on since starting IBM, and he was very happy about that. But the nice part about this product, and and I know this because obviously I'm part of the team, but
it's now your problem.
It's now my problem too. But it's also nice to see that IBM are actually committed into making a much nicer user experience, and a much nicer development experience for everybody. That's really the goal.
I'm tired of IBMI being the one-off. In the world of development, there's no reason for that. I mean, IBMI can be just as normal as developing on anything else. So why not provide that ecosystem?
I mean,
and help them. I mean, the biggest problem is, we want to help. We have to help our customers get there, and that's hopefully what Merlin can bring to the table, is that ability to help them close that gap, help them more easily get to a Git-based source control using some of these modern tools.
Right. I mean, Jesse, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, I mean, I've loved hearing the stories. I mean, we've heard Tim and I, you and I both heard a good number of stories over time of people telling us, they got to the point where they're able to hire on developers who never see a 5250 terminal, or in some cases don't even know that they're programming on an IBMI system. They just have a SSH terminal and they have, PHP or something, and they don't care what the platform is. And that's always just, exactly. It's just code. Right.
And, that's the thing that people, I hear about from customers on a regular basis is, I can't find RPG programmers. Well, I tell you, stop looking.
Right. They're looking wrong, or they're putting job postings for AS400 programmers and wondering why nobody's applying.
Yeah, thank you. I was waiting for that.
It's like, gee, why is nobody responding to this job post? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, a lot of those people that worked back then are like retired now, anyways, and want to stay that way. So, being able to have modern tools, modern development, so that you can leverage modern programmers, modern developers. Geez, seems to make sense to me. But, what do I know?
I've been asking myself that too.
See? Exactly.
I mean, what you know.
I was following.
That's okay, Tim. Usually I'm much more rougher on Jesse, so I'm just giving him a break, I suppose.
Yeah.
So
in one of my presentations, I have the example job postings that people have used, and the job posting that just says, "Hey, I'm looking for a programmer to do enterprise development, and by the way, there's Node and PHP involved. Apply within." Like they get like 200 applications, right? In that particular company, they ended up hiring somebody who does PHP and RPG code once they were hired on, and it was a huge success, right?
Wow.
So that, I mean, I'm with you that whole line of like, well, we can't find RPG developers. It's, well, that's you're doing it wrong.
Yeah,
it's the biggest lie on the planet.
Looking.
It is.
Stop looking.
It's the biggest lie on the planet. I've been doing it, many years now, and I used to be the young one. That's what everybody tells me now. So,
right.
Yeah, and it's very strange. I think, there's some things that have happened this year specifically. Just stuff to make RPG more accessible. My favorite one to give off is that this is the silliest thing, but you can search on GitHub now RPG as a language.
Right.
And that instantly makes it more accessible, because there are so many websites now that actually do not code quality. I'm sorry, they do. They'll do code based on popularity, based on how much is on GitHub. That's a prime. That's pretty standard. And the fact that RPG is now just another contender in that list. It may not be up there as many of the others, but at least it's on there. At least it's in that list now. And I can really, really respect that. That's a big deal in my eyes. And I think that making it more accessible, and Merlin definitely does that for the business, and I can really appreciate that. So, that's very important. Right. Accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And just normalizing it, right? It's just another language, right?
Normalization. That's really, for me, the biggie.
I mean, Liam and I both, I think, were both learning and programming RPG when we were 18, because that's just happened to be the language that we needed to use to solve some problems, right? It's just another language, and especially now with the advancements of the past, I don't know, Tim, 10 years especially.
We started about 13 years ago now, working on making RPG in particular modern.
Right.
Wow, it's come a long way. It's come a really long way. So yeah. I guess, Tim, I'll speak to the elephant in the YouTube chat here. What does this mean for Rational, and what does it mean for VS Code?
What does it mean for both of those? What it means is we have options. We have lots of good options. So first off, RDI. We are heads down. There will be several new releases coming out later this year with some new things. So that product is still very much fully supported, and will continue to be supported and continue to provide value to our IBM development community. There's a large group that is making great success with RDI. I want to continue to see them make great success with RDI. But with RDI, if you want to get to a full modern development ecosystem, you have to kind of build your own. You add your own components, you add your own plugins to get to where you want to get. Can be done. We have people that are doing it. Great. Go forth and do. I'm happy for you. VS Code, right? Code for I. Again, my bottom line is I don't want people using SEU. I want people using natural tools. So there's another group of people that, right, RDI, while it might be a good tool for lots of people, they're more comfortable in VS Code. Great, go forth. I think that's awesome. Merlin is really, it's a browser-based version of VS Code. So, you know, hey, there's a lot of synergy there. So again, it's another option to help our customers move.
Well, Jesse, you still there? Tim?
I'm here. We lost Tim for a few seconds. I think he's back.
Yeah. You know what? Somebody decided to like actually use like the phone feature on my phone. It's like, what the heck is that about? It's weird.
It's extended warranty stuff.
Yeah, it probably was too. Exactly. You know, so it's just another option. I help people move forward in this modern world.
Yeah, that's the key takeaway, isn't it? It's options. I mean, that's the whole key takeaway, even when we talk about the open source mission, which is, of course, you know, what I eat, sleep, breathe every day. It's like
Jesse.
we're yeah.
I mean, what you already had PHP. Why do you need Python or Node or Rust? I mean, isn't one good? Isn't one good enough? One size. What do you mean one size doesn't fit all?
It does, but it ain't PHP.
Yeah, see,
options.
It's just like, I like to think of it as like artwork. You know, you walk into an art gallery and we all look at the same painting, and it may be the cat's meow to you, Jesse, and I may think it's the ugliest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. And which one of us is wrong? Neither of us. We're both right.
Right.
Good analogy. Good analogy.
Yeah. That's beautiful. So,
well, Tim, we are kind of coming to a close, so I wonder if you have any last items you'd like to say.
Keep developing modern code. Take advantage of REST APIs. Take advantage of Git. If you have questions, call Liam. Call either any of us.
That's okay. I'll forward it on.
Yeah, exactly.
I know your email address. Cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Tim, thanks for coming on. It was brief.
Thanks, Tim.
That's it.
Awesome. Glad to have me. It was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
Good. Yeah. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it.
All right. Thank you, Tim. All right, Liam. The last slot on the agenda is future of IBMI discussion. So, do you care to explain how we're wrapping up today?
Absolutely. So, I enjoyed this, but anybody who is part of the Twitter space is welcome to request to speak and ask any question that they like, and you know, we can answer it to the best of our ability, basically. Or maybe not even ask a question, but maybe they wanted to start a discussion.
Share a story.
Yeah, share a story, whatever, anything, you know. But if you say the word, I'm gonna ring the bell. It's you know.
Yep. And so anybody who's just listening in on YouTube, again, hop over to that Twitter space and request to speak if you want to share ideas, thoughts, comments, questions.
Yep. If not, I mean, we'll give it 10 minutes or maybe 5, and then that's it. That's the whole day. We did 3.5 hours of this today, and it went extremely well. I have nothing bad to say about it at all. I can't wait to get the recording, and I can't wait to split it up. But at one point we had a peak of
about 200, I think, combining the two.
Yeah, about 200. And then, but YouTube has got unique views on the stream, right? We have an average of, wait, where does it say that? Sorry, there it is, of 472 unique listeners.
Nice.
That's pretty good. That's very good.
Yeah.
That's double the count last year.
Yeah. That's because we have two hosts.
That's right.
So next year we will have 8 hosts.
God.
We'll have 1,600 listeners. That's how the math will be mathing.
Oh my God, that sounds so painful. Very good.
But I think, did I just see a request to speak in the?
Did you?
Oh, no, no request to speak.
No, you just wishful thinking.
Yeah, I'm just wishful thinking. We're all shy. We're all ready to start our Friday weekends or something. But again, anybody who's listening in on the Twitter space, feel free to request to speak and share what's on your mind.
Yeah, this is my favorite part. I love the tough ones. They're my favorite.
Either that, or we'll do the middle school thing, and I will choose one of the listeners and just put you on the stage.
I'm surprised I haven't locked my phone for 3.5 hours and it's not hot. So Twitter Spaces have done a great job improving this.
Yeah, you're on iOS, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, I am.
My Pixel, as I DM'd you, I literally went and got an ice pack for the back of my Pixel about 2 hours in.
All right, we've got some. I see Rick.
All right, we got 2 requests to speak. Who was first? Rick was first, I think.
I got Rick. I added Rick.
All right, Rick, what's on your mind?
Oh,
there we go. He just accepted. Rick, what's on your mind? Rick is on mute, so just if you're speaking, Rick, you are muted.
Now I'm back here again.
There we go. Right. Yep, we got you loud and clear. What's on your mind?
You got me. I'm going to go for the third time, and I'm going to say, great show, great Twitter space, and I just want to ring the bell by saying A is for 100. You know, I want to. Hey, but on a more serious note, you guys just came out with Merlin, and this is I don't know if this is a fair question or not, but there are a lot of organizations in the modernization space. There's Profound, there's Fresh, there's Attica, there's others. And of course now, Merlin is really put out by IBM, but it's a company that's in conjunction with. Why am I skipping that? Who's putting out Merlin with IBM? I don't know why. Oh, help me out here, guys. One of you guys is on it too.
Do you mean? Are you asking who's working on? Oh, Tim Rowe is requesting to speak, so now I'm adding him. Maybe Tim will answer.
Well,
so we partnered with Arcad.
Arcad, that's who I was thinking. Thank you, Tim. That's it. Yep. And my question is this: does it give Arcad like sort of a leg up as far as modernization goes, and the other guys like the Freshes and the Asnas and the Profounds of the world, are they like a step behind?
No, not necessarily.
No.
So first off, IBM has been partnering with Arcad for 12 years. And we've partnered with them for a couple of very specific pieces to the development puzzle. And Merlin's no different. There's a couple of key pieces. When we talk about doing modern RPG, we wanted to have a fixed to free format conversion. Well, they had an awesome product. So let's use it. If you're going to do development, right, impact analysis. There's only 2 impact analysis tools on the market, really. Fresh has one with X Analysis, and Arcad has Observer. Well, you know, we've already had the relationship. Those were the key things that we really needed to help pull together this entire ecosystem. We also are leveraging some of their build support because they've been doing it. Other solutions are certainly things that we're looking to enable and allow to be part of Merlin as we move into the future. So, you know, it's just, we wanted to have that full IBMI solution, and we levered a couple of pieces to the puzzle.
Yep. And it probably goes without saying that there's no mutual exclusivity among the various tools you can use, right? If you're using some of the Merlin stuff, especially the CI/CD stuff, there's nothing that's preventing you from using any other tool that's out there, whether it's proprietary or open source, right? It's again, comes back to that big O word, which is options. and you can use the options for the individual pieces of your needs that work for you.
Excellent.
So, yeah, so
thank you for both of you for that. And just sort of a little follow-on question. How do you perceive that the IBMI community as a whole will take to something like, Red Hat OpenShift? Because it's something that they're really not accustomed to, right? And the whole DevOps process, and et cetera. What is your take on that? And do you think it's going to take a while for them to adapt?
Well, so,
I mean, I'm happy to answer, Jesse, or do you want to answer it?
Well, I was just going to say, we have 3 IBMers on deck right now. We'll probably all give you a slightly different answer, but Liam, I'll let you go first.
Quite brutally, I think it's going to be a difficult start, but there's something that people that will need to realize is that it's actually incredibly easy to run OpenShift in the cloud. And so, if running on-prem is something that, isn't quite suited to you, running in the cloud, talking to your IBM on-prem, in a hybrid cloud situation is definitely an option. It should be an option anyway. That's the way that I feel about it. So,
yeah. But also, there's nothing about the IBMI strategy right now that hinges on people adopting something like OpenShift, right? It's providing new options, and one of the reasons why OpenShift is a great option is because we already had a lot of clients adopting OpenShift. We already had a lot of clients wanting to do more in OpenShift, but definitely that's not all of our clients, right? We have a lot of clients who still have, like you say, it's newer. It's a newer option for them. They might not take too warmly to it at first. It's more learning curve. It's more technology to set up and manage whatever. But really, anybody who's a technology strategist needs to just think about what's the value add, right? And what's the business requirements, and how can we leverage technology to do things in the best way? And in some cases, that's OpenShift. In some cases, that's Merlin. In some cases, they might say, well, gee, I don't want to learn all this OpenShift stuff, but and I don't want the complexity of all this OpenShift stuff, but gee, if I had a CI/CD process, or just even a better build deploy process, that would really help. And so they might invest in something like that, using, again, stuff at a price point that's appropriate, because there's a lot of stuff even at that $0 price point. You can spin up a Jenkins and you can start building your own pipelines for $0 on the platform if that's the right answer for you.
Of course,
right?
Of course, Jesse.
So
you mentioned a key term there. You have to go do all that.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. But again, if there's a particular client that says, gee, I'm absolutely in no way adopting OpenShift, whether it's, just because of curmudgeonly attitude or because of, real feasible concerns about, complexity or cost or whatever, that still does not hinder IBMI's path forward. There's still plenty of ways to build modern applications, integrate with quantum, and a lot of the other stuff we've talked about today.
Excellent. Thank you so much, guys. I really appreciate the input and the feedback and the Twitter space today. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.
Awesome. Thank you. And we have another. Oh, well, we had another request to speak. I don't know if that just timed out. Oh no, you already added. You already added. All right, fantastic. What's on your mind?
Hey, he who cuts down is the Twitter tag, but I'm Jordan Peacock, co-founder and CEO of Becoming Machinic. And
yes, Jordan. That's good.
Yeah, it's been a while. Collaborated with Liam a couple of years ago on Naptime, which was trying to do REST calls from CL. It's open source. I can drop the link if anyone's interested, but I really love everything that you guys have done and been talking about today. Love seeing people, doing containerization, doing CI/CD, and kind of leveling that stuff up. And I missed the section on Kafka, so I'm going to go back and listen to that. Had another call. But if anyone else is doing stuff with like Kafka, Elasticsearch, integrating with the IBMI, I'd love to talk to you. And also very interested in exploring, I know I'm talking with Mark Irish a bit on this, but the possibility of getting OpenJDK into the present so that we can do stuff with Java more easily as well. So that's really it. Just wanted to say thank you and just make that call out. And thank you again.
Thanks, Jordan. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for attending.
I'm sure you can always get Jesse to talk about Camel.
Yeah. And Kafka. That's another. Yeah. I'll just talk for an hour.
That's anything Java, and I'm like, okay, I'll leave it to Jesse.
Pretty much.
Very good. Okay, well, anybody else while we have the time? Rick had some great questions. This is what this is all about.
Yeah, it's fantastic.
Love it. That's my favorite part about all of this. Well, I guess not. Maybe we'll leave it at that then, eh?
I think so.
Right.
I think so. So I think let's wrap it up. This concludes IBMI Developer Day for 2022. But yeah, I'll let Liam do the official wrap up. But I just want to throw in my 2 cents, which is obviously thanks to everybody for attending. The plan is to have a recording up online. So if you're not hearing me talk right now, hopefully you found this recording online and are listening to me on the recording. But definitely thanks everybody who is a speaker, everybody who attended, and hope everybody has a fantastic weekend. Liam, wrap it up and stage us off.
Yeah, I don't really have much more to say. There'll be separate recordings of each speaker on YouTube, and of course there'll be the entire space recording on Twitter here. And I mean, it's been great. This has been a significant improvement over last year, and last year was a load of fun. So this year was a load of fun too. So Jesse, thanks a bunch for helping. I mean, a lot of the cool speakers we had today were because of you. So I really thanks a lot for that. And yeah, that's it. Everyone go have a great weekend, I suppose, isn't it? So see you later. Nice. I'm officially ending it now. So actually, goodbye.